The story begins with Kong Jiama explaining that nothing unusual happened before this. The game he played was Blessing of Miracle, one of those generic mobile games with an automatic system that barely needed any explanation. The main reason he played it was simple: he liked the characters. Although he enjoyed the game, he never spent any money on it and had already cleared it. Then, one day, he was suddenly transported into its world. He did not become a playable character or even an NPC. Instead, he ended up as a completely unknown background character named Kong Jiama. While adjusting to his new life, he accidentally bumps into a blue-haired girl. After checking whether she was all right, he receives a polite apology in return before they go their separate ways. Fortunately, the game's setting was very similar to Korea. The names, locations, and geography felt familiar, allowing him to adapt quickly. For nearly a year, he lived as an ordinary teenager. Nothing about the world felt like a game anymore, and he spent his days like everyone else. One day, he returns home to find his family celebrating. His mother proudly presents an acceptance letter from Hoken Academy, and once again calls him the pride of the Seori Kong clan. Although Kong Jiama is already aware of his acceptance and asks them not to make such a fuss, his parents remain excited. With the entrance ceremony scheduled for the next day, they eagerly ask if he is prepared. After returning to his room, Kong Jiama reflects on the situation. His hope of living a quiet life has effectively disappeared. Everyone around him has high expectations, leaving him with little choice but to attend. The situation stems from the original owner of this body. Before Kong Jiama arrived, the boy had already passed the difficult entrance exam and secured admission to the prestigious academy. Since the parents have no idea their son has been replaced, Kong Jiama is left to deal with the consequences. Given how difficult admission is, he wonders whether the original Kong Jiama was exceptionally talented or possessed a blessing. Blessings are special abilities similar to game skills. Most are inherited, and not everyone possesses one. Society is divided into noble, common, and privileged classes based largely on these blessings, allowing powerful families to maintain their status. Hoken Academy was established to train heroes. For most of its history, only members of influential families could enter, but a special admission system was recently introduced. Kong Jiama was among the few students accepted through that route. Whether the academy needs more heroes or is preparing for the growing threat of monsters, one fact remains clear to him: this world is not his own. The academy exists to prepare students for future battles. While thinking about it, he opens his status window. His first blessing is pain negation, which allows him to ignore pain completely for 30 seconds, though it comes with a 12-hour cooldown. In his opinion, the ability is hardly impressive. However, there is also the blessing he received when possessing this body, the blessing of the sword god. Its effect is straightforward. Any attack he makes will cut its target. There is no activation limit, but it only works with blades shorter than 30 centimeters and narrower than 5 centimeters. Even with his knowledge of the game, he has never heard of such a blessing. The effect seems overly simple, and the weapon restriction stands out the most. After considering the measurements, he realizes the required blade is roughly the size of a sashimi knife. Looking over his abilities, Kong Jiama cannot understand why so much is expected of him. As he finishes preparing for the academy, another problem comes to mind. He still needs equipment. Even an E-rank weapon costs millions, while anything above C rank is worth hundreds of millions. A-rank and S-rank weapons are considered priceless treasures. The problem is that attending the academy already costs a fortune, and Kong Jiama cannot keep asking his parents for more money. Since students are required to bring equipment, he decides to buy whatever he can afford. Eventually, he visits a random shop and settles on several sashimi knives. At least they are known for being sharp, and in his view, a true master should not blame their equipment. The next day, during the entrance ceremony's weapon evaluation, his choice immediately attracts attention. Standing awkwardly beside a pile of convenience store sashimi knives, he draws the evaluator's disbelief. The professor cannot understand why a student would bring kitchen knives to the academy. Kong Jiama calmly explains that those knives are all he could bring. Having entered through the special admission system, he comes from a family that cannot afford expensive equipment. The badge on his uniform makes that fact obvious. When the professor continues criticizing him, Kong Jiama points out that an educational institution should not judge students based on wealth. He also remarks that blaming equipment is something amateurs do, while true experts focus on their own abilities. His response leaves an impression on the professor. Seeing confidence and determination in the boy, the professor approves his admission. Kong Jiama simply thanks him. Not everyone is pleased. Some students react negatively after learning that he entered through special admission, while others openly look down on him. The professor quickly silences the complaints and orders everyone to leave once the evaluation is finished. Wanting no part in the situation, Kangjiyama immediately leaves. Outside, the day has barely begun, yet he already feels exhausted. He expected people to judge him, but experiencing it firsthand still leaves a bad taste. At least the evaluation is over. Now only the qualification test remains. By this point, there is no turning back. He will be attending this academy for the next 3 years. Looking around the campus, he notices how different it feels compared to the game. The place is enormous, almost like a small city. He has to admit that the academy is impressive. The site also feels strangely personal. In his previous life, family circumstances forced him to drop out of high school. Standing here now feels surreal. Just then, an announcement over the intercom informs all new students that the tests are about to begin and instructs them to gather at the training grounds. Everything seems to be happening quickly, but a test is still a test, and he intends to do his best. Then he remembers a problem since arriving in this world. He has never actually used a knife. Still, he recalls his master's advice about never letting go of a blade. Thinking that a year of rest could not have erased 20 years of experience, he reassures himself and decides to test the knife. Drawing the blade from its packaging, he notices a blue aura surrounding it. The weapon satisfies the activation conditions, causing the blessing of the sword god to activate. A system message appears. Because both his physical level and the weapon's level are too low, suppression is applied to synchronize them. Kangjiyama is surprised that simply drawing the knife is enough to trigger the blessing. The activation completes. Immediately afterward, another message appears, wishing him the blessing of the gods. The next moment, intense pain strikes him. As the agony grows, he realizes that whatever is happening could kill him. An explosion follows, creating a rupture connected to a strange digital pathway. Completely confused, he drops the knife. The moment he lets go, reality returns to normal, and he finds himself back at the academy. Although the phenomenon has ended, a severe headache remains. He now understands that the blessing activated, but he cannot understand why it seemed to tear reality apart. The pain also feels like a price for using the ability. If every activation comes with this level of suffering, the blessing may be impossible to use. Meanwhile, the intercom continues calling students to the training grounds. Looking down at the knife lying on the ground, he hesitates. He does not want to leave it behind, but he is reluctant to touch it again. Eventually, he grabs the handle. The instant he does, a powerful shock runs through his body, causing him to cry out once more. The scene then shifts to the training hall in the center of the Colosseum, where a large crowd has already gathered. Meanwhile, the academy is filled with nobles discussing their children who have recently enrolled. Their attention soon shifts toward new arrival. The person entering is Siegfried von Nibelung, the Sword Emperor and a direct descendant of the legendary hero Aaron Nibelung. Among the crowd, a student with messy hair proudly remarks that Siegfried is considered the strongest human alive. As Siegfried arrives, another notable figure appears, Metapoison. She casually notes that it has been nearly half a century since they last met. Siegfried comments on her youthful appearance despite her age and questions why she is dressed like a student. Meta responds that every woman wants to remain beautiful for as long as possible and even offers to make him look younger with her abilities. Siegfried counters that she has barely aged at all and states that he values character more than appearance. Amused, Meta remarks that he has not changed in 50 years. She also finds his presence unusual since he normally avoids interacting with nobles. She suspects he may be interested in seeing his granddaughter, who is attending the academy. Siegfried ignores the suggestion and simply states that the event is about to begin. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama stands among the students, noticing how extravagant everyone's appearance is compared to his own plain black hair. At the same time, many students are whispering about him being one of the special admission candidates. For the first time, he truly feels the gap between himself and the academy's elite students. Suddenly, a commotion breaks out as another student arrives. Kangjiyama immediately recognizes the blue-haired girl. She is Abel von Nibelung, granddaughter of the Sword Emperor and the heroine of Blessing of Miracle. Seeing her in person leaves him stunned. She had already been impressive in the game, but her presence in reality feels completely different. The story then explains the existence of subspace, a realm separate from reality. Inside it, injuries and pain feel completely real, but events there do not affect the real world. Because of this, even lethal combat is permitted within the space. The Academy's entrance examination will take place there. Metapoison explains that the test will be a battle royale competition. Participants will be divided into groups of 10, and rankings will be determined by survival. She also announces that there will be no restrictions on equipment. C-Free points out that such a rule heavily favors wealthy students. Meta agrees, but argues that the noble families financially support the Academy. She adds that introducing the special admission system had already required considerable effort. Standing among the crowd, Kong finds himself distracted by Abel's appearance. However, because he knows the game's story, he quickly reminds himself not to get involved. Abel is one of the main heroines, and her story is tied to another protagonist. As far as Kong is concerned, that world has nothing to do with him. His goal is simple: survive school, avoid trouble, graduate safely, and find an ordinary job. Although heroes earn the highest salaries, the pain he experienced merely activating his blessing is enough to convince him that such a path is impossible. Rather than saving the world, he would much rather work a comfortable desk job. Soon, a crystal floating in the sky announces the official examination rules. The test will be a battle royale. The last survivor in each group will receive the star rank. Second and third place will earn the dragon rank. Fourth through seventh place will receive the wolf rank, while 8th through 10th place will be classified as ordinary rank. Scoring will be automatic, and there is no time limit. Listening to the explanation, Kong realizes the system functions almost exactly like a game. His objective is clear: finish the test quickly while attracting as little attention as possible. Moments later, a mechanical device releases blue energy throughout the area and officially begins the examination, wishing all participants the blessings of the heroes. Kong only concern is avoiding the use of his weapon if possible. The test progresses rapidly. Before long, most participants have already been eliminated, and the rankings begin appearing one group after another. Rachel takes first place in the 24th group. In the 47th group, Saki Ryo claims first place while Sarita secures second. Watching the results, Meta comments that the competition feels somewhat predictable. With descendants of powerful families, such as the Nibelongs, Changs, and Jelongs participating, the outcome was never in doubt. Among them, Abel's performance stands out the most. She clears her group in only 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Although she fails to surpass her grandfather's Academy record, the result still places her among the Academy's 10 fastest performers. Siegfried remarks that such talent is only natural for a descendant of the Nibelung family. Believing the event is essentially over, he prepares to leave. Meta asks whether he has any interest in watching the other noble descendants, but he dismisses them entirely and shows little regard for the Academy's aristocratic students. After exchanging farewells, the two prepare to part ways. Then, without warning, both of them suddenly stop. At the same moment, shock spreads throughout the entire arena. A strange energy suddenly spreads through the arena. Metapoison immediately notices it and asks Siegfried whether he felt it as well. Looking around, Siegfried becomes alarmed. He cannot determine where the disturbance is coming from. Then both of them notice a blue light in the sky. As everyone looks up, the space above begins to crack apart. Fragments break away and fall toward the ground, exploding among the students. Confusion spreads through the crowd as people wonder whether someone has fallen out of the subspace. A second flash appears. This time, Siegfried watches as a small knife drops from the sky, followed by a person. Meta immediately orders the medics and cadets to respond. Lying on the ground is none other than Kong. The story then flashes back to reveal what happened inside the subspace. At the time, a blonde student was struggling against one of the Mao brothers while another student was struck down nearby. Kong quickly realizes that the examination has turned into something far worse than a simple battle royale. The Mao brothers have a reputation for brutality. Instead of eliminating opponents quickly, they have spent over 30 minutes tormenting the remaining participants. What confuses Kong most is that they have completely ignored him so far, as though he is too insignificant to bother with. One brother casually checks whether a victim is still alive before throwing another participant aside. The other complains that the match has become boring and begins counting how many people remain. Despite discussing slowing down, they continue eliminating students without hesitation. Soon, their attention turns toward a frightened girl hiding nearby. The red-clad brother begins approaching her while the blue-clad brother watches. The terrified girl has nowhere to run. Seeing this, Kangjiyama can no longer stay silent. He steps forward and calls out the brothers for their actions. The brothers barely react. Instead, they become curious about who interrupted them. After recognizing him as a special admission student, they immediately dismiss him as an easy target. One brother threatens to crush him, while the other talks about making an example of him. Kangjiyama's mind races. His pain negation blessing lasts only 30 seconds, and these two have been dominating the battlefield for over half an hour. Under normal circumstances, he has no chance. Then he remembers the sashimi knife in his bag. The moment he touches it, the blessing of the sword god will activate. He knows the risks, but it is the only option available. Drawing the knife, he triggers the blessing once again. A blue aura surrounds the blade. The Mao brothers are briefly surprised before bursting into laughter. To them, the weapon looks ridiculous. Even the frightened girl stares in disbelief. Certain of victory, the red-clad brother charges directly at him. At the same time, Kangjiyama activates pain negation. 30 seconds. That is all he has. As the blessing activates, the red-clad brother continues mocking the tiny kitchen knife. Kangjiyama knows there is no room for hesitation. Either he cuts his opponent down or he dies. The only problem is that he is not cutting a fish. He is cutting a person. A memory suddenly surfaces. Years ago, while working in a kitchen, he once asked his mentor whether the scenes in gangster movies were realistic. The question earned him an immediate scolding and a reminder to call him master. His mentor, a former gangster, had even severed one of his own hands as atonement for his past crimes. Curious, Kangjiyama had asked whether a person could really be cleanly cut apart with a knife. His mentor explained that human skin and muscles contract when struck, making clean cuts extremely difficult. Stabbing repeatedly is much easier than slicing through a body. Fish are sliced while lying still for a reason. When Kangjiyama suggested that maybe the mentor simply lacked skill, he received another smack and was firmly told that such a thing was impossible. Back in the present, that claim is put to the test. The blessing of the sword god states only one thing. If he attacks, it will cut. The blade flashes. The red-clad brother's expression changes instantly. His arm separates from his body and flies through the air before crashing onto the ground. For a moment, he cannot even understand what happened. Then the pain arrives. As the severed arm lands nearby, the brother lets out a scream of agony. Watching the result, Kangjiyama slowly steps forward. Panicking, the blue-clad Mao brother calls for help and retreats toward his sibling. However, the red-clad brother is already frozen in place, unable to process what just happened. Realizing the danger, the red-clad brother rushes at Kangjiyama, convinced that the boy intends to cut them both down. Before he can react, Kangjiyama makes another move. The attack passes through him as effortlessly as a knife slicing through paper. The blue-clad brother watches in horror as his sibling is cut apart. Looking down, he sees part of his brother's head on the ground beside him. He screams and calls out for his brother, Shun. Nearby, the rescued girl watches the scene in complete shock. Meanwhile, the surviving Mao brother desperately tries to regain his composure. He reminds himself that they are inside the subspace and convinces himself that Kangjiyama is still just an amateur. Perhaps the previous attacks were some kind of coincidence. Still, one fact is impossible to ignore. That knife is dangerous. Concluding that his brother lost because he was careless, the Mao brother activates several blessings at once. One reinforces his defenses, another increases his jumping ability by 200%, and a third enhances the spiritual damage of his attacks. Confident in his abilities, he declares that it is time to show Kangjiyama his true strength. Whatever that knife may be, he believes even an S-rank weapon would not be able to damage his fists. While the Mao brother prepares for battle, Kangjiyama remains standing still. Silently, he counts the remaining seconds of his blessings. 21. The Mao brother charges forward, insisting that he is nothing like his sibling. In his mind, if Kangjiyama remains motionless, he will simply crush his head. As the distance closes, Kangjiyama continues counting. 5 seconds remain. Then, suddenly something happens. The Mao brother freezes in confusion. He cannot understand what just occurred. For a brief moment, he wonders whether Kangjiyama somehow used him as the target of a thrown blade. Before he can figure it out, his consciousness fades. With only 2 seconds remaining on the blessings, the Mao brother collapses. At that exact moment, the effects end. The pain Kangjiyama had been suppressing crashes into him all at once, causing him to collapse in agony. Sometime later, he opens his eyes in what appears to be a hospital room. As he sits up, a blonde student notices and immediately rushes outside to announce that he is awake. Moments later, two visitors enter. Kangjiyama instantly recognizes one of them, not from personal experience, but from history. The man standing before him is Siegfried, one of the 7 heroes of the 7 Stars, and the warrior who defeated the 6th Legion commander of the Demon Lord's army 50 years ago. Beside him stands Metapoison. Wondering why such important figures are visiting him, Kangjiyama waits nervously. Siegfried begins by asking for his name before directly questioning him about what happened during the examination. Although Kangjiyama is not entirely sure himself, he realizes that whatever occurred was connected to him. As he answers, he notices Siegfried's hand resting on his sword. The sight alone makes him aware of the overwhelming gap between them. Nervously, he admits that he may have gone too far during the examination and states that he is willing to accept whatever punishment follows. Siegfried simply studies him in silence. Before the conversation can continue, Meta interrupts and tells Siegfried to stop intimidating the student. She casually approaches Kangjiyama and explains that Siegfried personally treated his meridians while he was unconscious. She also admits that she has become interested in him after seeing the examination footage. Siegfried immediately scolds her for behaving so informally with a new student. Completely confused by the situation, Kangjiyama struggles to understand why the Sword Emperor helped him and why the Academy president seems so interested in him. Meta explains that she reviewed the recordings while he was unconscious. Watching him risk himself to protect another student left a strong impression on her. In her eyes, his actions were heroic. Once again, Siegfried tells her to behave more appropriately. Eventually, Meta gets back to the main point. Neither she nor Siegfried intends to punish him for what happened during the examination. She does mention, however, that the 2 Mao brothers appear ready to withdraw from the academy. The news leaves Kangjiyama somewhat surprised, though he is relieved that he will not have to deal with them again. Siegfried then reveals the real reason they came. Kangjiyama achieved the highest ranking in the entire evaluation. The announcement leaves him stunned. His goal had always been to avoid attention and live a quiet life, yet somehow he had become the Academy's top student. Later, in Meta's office, the Academy president reflects on her nearly 20 years in charge of the institution and admits that she has never seen a situation like this before. To her surprise, Kangjiyama openly states that he does not want the position. Both Meta and Siegfried are confused. They explain that becoming part of the star class is an extraordinary honor and that the ranking was determined directly by the subspace itself. After listening to their explanation, Kangjiyama still refuses to be enthusiastic about it. His reaction leaves Siegfried completely puzzled. Afterward, Meta asks whether he is upset that Kangjiyama has taken the position many expected to go to his granddaughter. Siegfried dismisses the idea. The subspace was created to identify heroes. If it selected Kangjiyama as the most outstanding cadet, then that decision should be respected. For him, there is no reason to oppose the judgment of the subspace. Siegfried could have understood the situation if Kangjiyama possessed overwhelming talent, an extraordinary physique, or years of experience. The problem was that none of those things applied. Kangjiyama was still a young boy whose body had not even fully matured. Yet, during the examination, his movements and cuts displayed a level of swordsmanship that reflected true mastery. It was the kind of concept Siegfried himself had pursued for decades. What made the situation even stranger was Kangjiyama's physical condition. After examining him, Siegfried found no signs of training. His body was fragile and poorly conditioned, completely inconsistent with the skill he had displayed. The contradiction made no sense. For the first time in many years, Siegfried felt a sense of curiosity and competitiveness. He wanted to understand how someone so young could possess such ability. Metapoison, meanwhile, treated the matter far less seriously. In her usual eccentric manner, she joked about Kangjiyama's potential and teased Siegfried for his thoughts on the matter. Siegfried responded by bluntly pointing out the nickname Academy staff used for women like her. The comment immediately started another argument between them. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama managed to achieve what he considered a major victory. Instead of remaining at the top of the rankings, he was reassigned to the Wolf class. Previously, there had been discussions about placing him in one of the Academy's elite classes, possibly even the Tiger class. However, Meta insisted that the details surrounding him remain confidential. For Kangjiyama, the Wolf class was ideal. His goal had always been to stay away from attention, avoid power struggles, and live as quietly as possible. Given everything that had happened, ending up there was a far better outcome than becoming the Academy's star student. When he enters the classroom, every student immediately turns toward him. The badge on his chest naturally attracts attention. Fortunately, after a brief look, everyone returns to their own conversations. Kangjiyama quietly relaxes. Being ignored is exactly what he wants. After taking his seat, he begins enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of being left alone. That peace lasts only a few seconds. A familiar red-haired girl approaches him. It is the girl he rescued during the examination. She thanks him for helping her, and when he appears confused, she clarifies that she is referring to the Battle Royale test. Using unusually formal speech despite being the same age, she expresses her gratitude. Kangjiyama brushes it off, saying anyone would have done the same. Privately, however, he feels a little guilty. Everyone views him as a hero, but from his perspective, he had simply been trying to survive. The two exchange introductions. She introduces herself as Chloe, while Kangjiyama introduces himself in return. He politely remarks that he did not expect them to end up in the same class. Internally, though, he is puzzled. After spending countless hours playing the game, he has no memory of a character named Chloe. Since the main story begins during the war against the demon tribe and she never appeared there, he concludes that she is probably just another ordinary student. Before the conversation can continue, Kangjiyama asks her to keep the events of the examination a secret. Chloe agrees. She seems ready to ask him something in return, but the instructor arrives before she can continue. The class immediately settles down. The instructor introduces himself as Lee Won-bin, the Wolf class homeroom teacher. After congratulating everyone on their admission, he reminds them that they now carry the legacy and pride of Hero Valor Hoken. Without wasting time, he orders the students to change into their training uniforms. Physical training will begin in 30 minutes. When a student asks about the day's training schedule, Kangjiyama already suspects the answer. The routine turns out to be a basic endurance program that reminds him of a certain famous training regimen. Curious about something else, Kangjiyama approaches the instructor. To his surprise, Lee Won-bin already knows his name. Kangjiyama explains that he is not feeling well. The instructor casually remarks that ordinary training may not be necessary for the Academy's highest-ranked cadet and suggests transferring him to the star class instead. At that moment, Kangjiyama immediately realizes that Meta must have informed the instructors about his real ranking. He quickly changes the subject and claims that he only needed permission to visit the restroom. Soon afterward, training begins. Outside, the students run lap after lap around the field. Kangjiyama quickly falls behind. His lack of conditioning becomes painfully obvious. He struggles through what is supposed to be a warm-up, only for Chloe to catch up and ask whether the exercise is really that difficult. Embarrassed, he insists that he is doing fine. At that point, he has completed 5 laps. Chloe casually mentions that she is already on her 9th. Before he can respond, she encourages him to keep going and runs off ahead. Watching her disappear into the distance, Kangjiyama realizes just how unprepared he truly is. Later that day, after training finally ends, he returns to his room exhausted. Empty bottles are scattered around as he collapses into a chair. After only 1 week at the Academy, he has discovered an unexpected problem. Food. The scene shifts to the cafeteria, where Kangjiyama arrives, starving and ready to order a proper meal. Before he can buy anything, the cafeteria worker asks for his meal ticket. Only then does he learn that food requires separate meal passes. Confidently, he heads off to buy one. The moment he sees the price, however, his confidence disappears. The cost is absurdly high. Now sitting alone with the cheapest drink he could afford, Kangjiyama stares at the menu in frustration. The Academy charges so much for food that a single meal nearly costs what he once spent in an entire month just getting by. One day, a system notification suddenly appears before Kangjiyama. His physical stats have reached level 12. The message explains that as his power increases, more restrictions from the blessing of the sword god will be lifted. He can now use blades up to 38 centimeters in length. The notification immediately lifts his mood. His training has not been pointless after all. Looking in a mirror, he notices that his body has become more defined. His growth is progressing surprisingly fast, likely due to the effects of the sword god's blessing. At this rate, he may soon be able to wield a proper short sword. Ironically, on the day of the entrance examination, he had been afraid to draw a blade. Now he feels uncomfortable whenever he is not carrying one. The change makes him wonder whether the blessing is subtly affecting his mind. Before he can think further, someone knocks on the door. When he opens it, he finds Chloe standing outside. Politely, she asks if she can come in and whether she's interrupting anything. Since he was simply resting, Kangjiyama assures her that it is not a problem. Chloe explains that she has not seen him in the cafeteria all week and wanted to check whether he was doing all right. Kangjiyama tells her that he is fine and has simply been finding food elsewhere. Satisfied with the answer, Chloe says she will stop worrying. She then casually mentions that she plans to cook dinner and needs to buy ingredients. At first, Kangjiyama seems uninterested. Moments later, however, he is already outside with her, urging her to hurry while confidently declaring that he can handle the cooking himself. Sometime later, dinner is finished. Chloe has already cleaned her plate and enthusiastically praises the meal. Kangjiyama notices that every bit of food has disappeared. Curious, he asks why her refrigerator contains so much fish. Chloe explains that she grew up near the coast. Hearing that, Kangjiyama immediately brightens. Fish happens to be his specialty. Wanting to show off, he decides to prepare another dish using his sashimi skills. Unfortunately, the sword god's blessing complicates things. He asks whether she owns a long knife similar to a sword. Chloe offers her own sword, but after seeing it, Kangjiyama decides against using it. Instead, he settles on another approach. Activating both pain negation and the blessing of the sword god, he prepares the entire dish in only 21 seconds. Even he is impressed by the result. Chloe asks how he became so skilled at cooking. Kangjiyama explains that he once worked part-time at a Japanese restaurant. To his surprise, Chloe does not even seem familiar with the concept of part-time work. The difference in their backgrounds becomes obvious, so he simply tells her that he is glad she enjoyed the food. Chloe offers to handle the dishes afterward. With dinner finished, Kangjiyama steps outside and spends some time quietly looking at the moon. That peace lasts only a moment. A loud crash suddenly comes from inside the house. Turning around, he quickly realizes that Chloe has very little experience washing dishes. As the commotion continues, a book falls from a nearby shelf and opens. At first glance, it appears to be a diary. Without thinking, Kangjiyama glances at one of the pages. The entry mentions receiving help from someone in class and wanting to repay the favor. Amused by the stickers decorating the diary, he finds it surprisingly cute. Then he accidentally reads another passage. This time, the entry mentions the person who saved her during the examination. It describes how being in the same class makes her heart race and how she struggles to find the courage to speak openly with him. Rather than feeling embarrassed, Kangjiyama simply finds the situation adorable. Unfortunately, curiosity gets the better of him. As he turns more pages, he discovers countless declarations of affection scattered throughout the diary. At that point, he decides it may be wise to leave immediately. Before he can escape, Chloe notices exactly what he has been reading. Startled, she drops the glass in her hand and freezes. The story then shifts to Chloe's past. Among the heroic families of the world, reputation is earned through defeating monsters and protecting humanity. Yet some families handle tasks that others cannot openly perform. One such family is the Sicily family, known as the Auditors of Sicily. Their role is assassination. For generations, they have operated from the shadows to maintain order where direct action is impossible. Because of this responsibility, every child born into the family undergoes severe conditioning before reaching puberty. They are taught to suppress emotions and endure relentless training so they can become assassins before the age of 15. Chloe was no exception. At 15, she carried out her first assassination. Throughout her childhood, elders repeatedly reminded her that she possessed exceptional talent and should accept her role. Years of harsh training gradually shaped her mentality and left scars that never fully healed. By the time she entered the academy, any member of the Sicily family possessed enough ability to qualify for the dragon class or higher. Yet family tradition dictated otherwise. They deliberately entered lower-ranked classes to avoid attention. Before she left home, an elder warned her never to stand out. As a result, Chloe accepted that even at the academy, she would never truly be free to live as she pleased. She assumed her life there would be as predictable as everything that came before. Then she met Kangjiyama. For the first time, something unexpected entered her world. For Chloe, everything began during the examination. When Kangjiyama stepped forward and confronted the Mao brothers, asking whether they had lost their minds, something changed. Originally, Chloe had fully accepted what was about to happen. Her family's plan had always been for her to remain in a lower-rank class. Dying inside the subspace was simply part of maintaining that image. Since death there was not permanent, she had prepared herself to endure it without resistance. She was not afraid. It was the life she had always known. Then Kangjiyama appeared. The path she had accepted without question was suddenly interrupted. For the first time, she saw someone drawing a sword for the sake of another person rather than for duty, status, or family expectations. He stood between her and danger. The sight reminded her of a fairy tale she had loved as a child, a story about a princess trapped in a castle and the person who came to save her. At that moment, her heart began racing. A single question entered her mind. Was this what people called love? Back in the present, Kangjiyama is completely unaware of what is going through her head. The atmosphere between them has become unbearably awkward. They stare at each other in silence, while he desperately tries to understand why she seems so upset. Attempting to change the subject, he comments on how beautiful the moon looks that night. After thanking her for the meal, he decides it would be best to leave. Just as he turns to go, Chloe suddenly asks whether he saw it. Confused, Kangjiyama asks what she means. Chloe makes it clear that she is talking about the diary. Embarrassed, he awkwardly tries to pretend he only saw a notebook and assumes she must be studying hard. Unfortunately, Chloe is not fooled. She continues pressing him while he repeatedly denies reading anything. After several attempts to avoid the question, he finally admits the truth. Yes, he saw it. The moment he confesses, the atmosphere changes completely. Chloe slowly begins drawing her sword. Kangjiyama immediately realizes something is wrong. Looking around, he quickly assesses his situation. The room is on the 4th floor, eliminating the possibility of escaping through the window. The door is the only exit, but Chloe stands between him and it. As she slowly advances, dragging her sword across the floor, Kangjiyama notices how different she looks. Her eyes are empty. Her expression lacks emotion. The cheerful girl from earlier seems to have vanished entirely. At that moment, he recalls several occasions when her personality had shifted unexpectedly during their conversations. Now the difference is impossible to ignore. The diary appears to have triggered something. Whatever is standing in front of him now feels far more dangerous than the Mao brothers ever did. Kangjiyama desperately searches for a way out. His sashimi knife is still in his room. The knife he used for cooking is nearby, but there is no chance he can reach it before Chloe attacks. Then he spots a box cutter lying on a table. At the same moment, Chloe lunges. Without hesitation, Kangjiyama grabs the box cutter. Part of him wishes they could have solved this through conversation, but there is no longer time for that. The blessing of the sword god activates. As Chloe closes the distance, Kangjiyama calmly notes that her hair has become a little too long. The blade flashes. A clean cut follows. The scene then shifts. Chloe is lying on a bed. When she finally wakes up, she appears completely disoriented. The first thing she does is ask where Kangjiyama is. Fragments of memory return to her. She remembers seeing him standing near the window while she was washing dishes. Then she notices her katana nearby. Relieved, she picks it up. Apparently, losing consciousness after using the weapon is not unusual for her. Most of the time, after carrying out an assassination, her memories become vague. What she remembers most clearly are the words of the old man who raised her, constantly reminding her never to reject her talent as an assassin. Frustrated, she collapses face first onto her pillow. Of all the times to faint, it had to happen while Kangjiyama was there. Her embarrassment only grows the more she thinks about it. Then, something catches her attention. A box cutter is lying on the floor. Confused, she wonders why it is there. Reaching up absent-mindedly, she touches her hair. Only then does she realize it feels noticeably shorter than before. Still confused after waking up, Chloe investigates the room and eventually discovers the trimmed hair in the trash. Rather than questioning what happened, she reaches her own conclusion. In her mind, Kangjiyama had carefully cut her hair and cleaned everything up afterward. To someone as emotionally unstable as Chloe, this only reinforced her feelings. Instead of being disturbed, she interprets it as an act of kindness. Convinced that he is incredibly thoughtful, she immediately opens her diary and begins filling more pages with entries about how much she loves Kangjiyama. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama is having a much worse time. Outside, he is sitting on a bench while fighting the urge to throw up. Although he managed to escape the situation, it came at a cost. During the confrontation, He extended the blessing of the sword god 5 seconds beyond the remaining 9 seconds he had available. The strain leaves him completely exhausted. After finally recovering, he begins thinking back on what happened. What troubles him most is Chloe's fighting style. A normal swordsman would focus on disarming an opponent or rendering them unable to fight. Chloe, however, never seemed interested in restraint. Every attack targeted a vital point with a clear intention of killing as efficiently as possible. The style resembles that of an assassin rather than a duelist. During the confrontation, Kong genuinely felt his life was in danger. Instinctively, he had attempted to counter with a lethal strike of his own. Fortunately, the box cutter was too short to produce the result his instincts demanded. Instead of something far worse, Chloe ended up with nothing more than a shortened hairstyle. Afterward, she lost consciousness, allowing the situation to end peacefully. At least, by Kong standards, it ended peacefully. As he reflects on everything, he realizes once again that life at the academy is anything but simple. Before arriving in this world, he had been far more ambitious. In his previous life, he stood at the top of his profession as a master of sashimi knives. Here, however, everyone seems trapped by roles and destinies that were already decided. The game he entered was called Blessing of Miracle because of the legendary blessing that the true protagonist would eventually receive. Another legendary blessing belonged to the hero Valor. As far as Kong remembers, those were the only legendary blessings that existed in the game. The story itself was straightforward. The protagonist would be chosen by both the Holy Sword and the Demon Sword Balmong before setting out to save the world from the Demon King. Meanwhile, Kong had somehow ended up chosen by a sashimi knife. The comparison leaves him so frustrated that he smacks himself in the face. Lately, everything happening at the academy has distracted him from the reason he came here in the first place. Although he knows some of the game's major characters and events, there is still a lot about this world he does not understand. One thing, however, is certain. According to the original storyline, the time has finally arrived. The protagonist's blessing should awaken soon, and the true main character should begin attending the academy. In other words, the real story is about to begin. Even though Kong never finished the game, he remembers enough of the first half to know what comes next. For now, the safest option is to follow the original storyline as closely as possible. If his memory is correct, the major turning point occurs during the second semester of the third year. The birth of a new hero will attract the attention of the demon race. They will launch an attack on the academy. That battle will escalate into a war between humanity and the demons, eventually growing into a conflict that engulfs the entire world. From a storytelling perspective, Kong knows the plot is painfully cliché. In fact, this was around the point where he originally lost interest in the game and stopped playing. The difference now is that this world is real. The war is not a future event inside a game. It is something that will actually happen. The only question is whether he will survive it. At the moment, he still has 3 years before those events unfold. That gives him time to prepare. Ideally, he would like to find a way back to his original world. If that proves impossible, then his only option will be to become strong enough to survive. After all, Blessing of Miracle was supposed to be a game filled with heroes, adventures, and happy endings. Surely there must be a path that leads to one. The protagonist will undoubtedly survive the coming story. Kong however, still needs enough power to protect himself when that day arrives. At the same time, Kong knows he cannot attract too much attention. If he becomes too prominent, he will inevitably be dragged into the future war against the Demon King's army. The recent incident with Chloe also taught him an important lesson. He cannot keep relying on pain negation every time he gets into trouble. Opening his status window, he reviews his current information. His growth has been surprisingly impressive. What catches his attention, however, is that the interface seems to reveal more details with each passing day. Some entries are easy enough to understand, such as mental strength. Others are not. One particular stat immediately stands out. Assimilation rate. Curious, he selects it. A message appears stating that access to the information is restricted. Rather than providing answers, the system only leaves him with more questions. For now, though, he decides to focus on a more immediate problem. He needs a proper weapon. Relying on pain negation for 30 seconds at a time is not a sustainable strategy. Fortunately, he remembers an event from the game. Next month, the Academy will hold a series of examinations. One of the rewards is a B-rank sword called Murasame. If he can obtain it, the weapon should be more than enough to carry him through the academy. More importantly, its dimensions fall outside the activation conditions of the blessing of the sword god. That means he can use it normally without triggering the blessing. The conclusion is unavoidable. If he wants that sword, he will have to work harder than he originally intended. While thinking about it, he suddenly hears someone calling out nearby. Looking up, he immediately recognizes the owner of the voice. Standing there is Abel von Nibelung. Her cyan hair makes her impossible to mistake for anyone else. She looks exhausted and slightly battered from training. Without any introduction, she informs him that he is sitting in her usual spot. Kangjiyama simply stares at her. His mind goes blank. Even after seeing her several times, the fact that he is talking to one of the game's main heroines still feels surreal. Not receiving an answer, Abel impatiently asks whether he intends to say anything. Kangjiyama remains frozen. After a moment, she casually tells him that he does not need to leave and can simply sit beside her. The statement only confuses him further. He privately wonders what she means by claiming ownership of a public bench. Even so, he decides it is best not to start an argument. His original plan has always been to avoid getting involved with important characters, especially the heroine. Unfortunately, avoiding her becomes difficult when she insists on sitting next to him. As they sit in silence, Kangjiyama cannot help noticing how exhausted she looks. Abel eventually breaks the silence herself. She explains that she likes this particular spot because the stars are easiest to see from there. Caught completely off guard, Kangjiyama struggles to come up with a response. His social skills fail him once again. At the same time, he cannot help comparing the person in front of him to the version he knew from the game. This is Abel von Nibelung, granddaughter of the Sword Emperor and one of the most important characters in the story. Yet she seems surprisingly approachable. After a while, Abel asks whether he uses a sword. The question immediately puts Kangjiyama on edge. Unsure how she figured that out, he asks how she knows. Abel casually explains that her grandfather mentioned it. According to him, swordsmen tend to have a distinct look in their eyes. For a brief moment, Kangjiyama worries that his secret has somehow been exposed. Fortunately, that does not seem to be the case. As the conversation continues, he finds himself distracted by her unusual appearance. The colorful hair, the antenna-like strands sticking up from her head, and her sharp eyes create a rather unique impression. Abel suddenly offers to let him hold her sword. The proposal catches him completely off guard. Politely, he declines. Despite recognizing her, he has no intention of becoming involved with her if he can avoid it. Abel finds his reaction strange. Everyone at the academy knows who she is, yet he seems completely uninterested. Eventually, Kangjiyama admits that he knows her name. In response, Abel points out that she does not know his. The conversation only becomes more confusing from there. She remarks that it feels cliché for one person to know the other's name, while the reverse is not true. Uninterested in playing along, Kangjiyama asks why he should introduce himself to someone he has only just met. Abel simply shrugs and says that it is useful to know people. After all, he could secretly be a spy for the Demon King. The accusation is obviously not serious, but she continues anyway. She points out that it is strange for someone to be sitting alone at night in a place where she usually comes to train. Listening to her reasoning, Kangjiyama can only wonder how he ended up having this conversation in the first place. At that moment, Kangjiyama notices Abel resting a hand on her sword and briefly feels as though he is being interrogated. Rather than answering directly, he turns the question around and points out that she could just as easily be a spy for being there. Abel calmly explains that she is training. Kangjiyama immediately claims that he is training as well. Curious, Abel asks what kind of training leaves someone sitting so calmly on a bench. He answers that he is practicing breathing exercises. During the conversation, Kangjiyama notices several wounds on her hands. The moment Abel realizes he has seen them, she instinctively tries to hide her arm. After a brief pause, Kangjiyama compliments her dedication. Abel accepts the compliment and explains that carrying the bloodline of Siegfried comes with enormous pressure. According to her, people constantly expect perfection from her. Any weakness would invite criticism and create opportunities for others to take advantage of her position. Eventually, the conversation shifts to the academy rankings. Abel admits that this year is the first time she has failed to become the top student. For someone with her reputation, The experience is entirely new. Surprisingly, she says the result was not entirely unpleasant. In some ways, it felt like a relief. At the same time, however, she is determined to find the person who surpassed her. Once she does, she intends to defeat them. Kangjiyama asks whether she really needs to take it that seriously. Abel answers that it is a matter of pride. She even tried asking her grandfather for information, only to learn that the person was not in her class and had only recently enrolled at the academy. Realizing she has revealed more than intended, Abel quickly apologizes and remarks that she should not be discussing such personal matters with someone she just met. This only makes Kangjiyama more curious. He asks why she decided to tell him all of this in the first place. Abel's answer is straightforward. She says it is because he seems weak. According to her family's teachings, they should be firm with the strong and kind to the weak. Hearing that, Kangjiyama finally understands why she's been so approachable. She is not treating him as an equal. She simply thinks he is harmless. Suddenly, many things about her behavior begin to make sense. After a while, Kangjiyama decides it is time to leave. He wishes her a good night and starts walking away. Before he can escape, Abel stops him one last time and asks when he plans to tell her his name. The scene then shifts back to academy life. Compared to everything he expected, things have been surprisingly peaceful. Chloe quickly adapts to the class environment, making friends and fitting in naturally. Kangjiyama, on the other hand, avoids eye contact whenever she approaches. Her friends often give him disapproving looks, but he pays little attention to them. Most likely, they dislike him because of his special admission status. Still, he considers himself fortunate. The Wolf class is exactly where he wants to be. At the beginning of every school year, the Star and Dragon classes usually become involved in factional politics and competitions between influential families. Even back when he played the game, Kangjiyama found those storylines annoying. He is relieved that he does not have to participate in any of it. As he wonders what to eat that day, an unexpected gift arrives. Metapoison personally sends him a black card along with an apology for forgetting to give it to him earlier. To his surprise, it is her personal card. Kangjiyama is completely stunned. For a moment, he feels as though someone has suddenly decided to sponsor his entire academy life. More importantly, however, everything still seems to be following the original storyline. So far, he has not caused any major disruptions. If things continue like this for the next 3 years, he might actually achieve the quiet future he wants. Of course, that optimism conveniently ignores the massive war waiting in the future. Later, during class, a professor begins teaching a lesson about a war that occurred 700 years ago. The conflict was fought between the Demon King and the hero Joa Queen. After the war ended, Joa Queen established a system to train future heroes, eventually founding the academy alongside 7 disciples. The professor emphasizes that the material will appear on future exams. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama struggles to stay awake. Having played the game numerous times, he already knows most of the information by heart. The lecture eventually focuses on Valoran, one of the academy's founders. For over 20 years, Valoran fought against the demon commanders and led humanity's resistance against the demon armies. During a battle against the commander Lycan, however, Valoran lost an arm. The injury permanently ended his ability to fight on the battlefield. At the end of the First War, the battlefield was covered in blood, and neither side could claim a decisive victory. The conflict ultimately ended in a truce between humans and demons. It was after this war that Joa Queen founded the academy. The professor reminds the class that these events took place 700 years ago and that the long period of peace humanity enjoys today exists because of those sacrifices. Some students begin wondering whether a war of that scale could happen during their own generation. Kangjiyama already knows the answer. The 700 years of peace are nearing their end. Part of him considers warning Metapoison. However, he has no idea what consequences such a revelation might create. Despite her carefree attitude and frequent complaints about academy work, Meta is one of the first people destined to notice the coming disaster. In the original story, she is among the earliest heroes to step forward and protect the students when everything begins to fall apart. Unfortunately, Kangjiyama also remembers something else: her fate. Although he never finished the game, he clearly remembers that Meta eventually becomes one of the first major sacrifices in the war against the Demon King. The thought leaves him uneasy. Soon, the professor concludes the lecture, thanks everyone for their attention, and reminds them that examinations will begin in 2 weeks. As students begin leaving the classroom, Kangjiyama remains seated, lost in thought. That is when he overhears nearby conversations. People are talking about someone. Checking the date on his phone, he suddenly remembers. May 5th. This is the day the protagonist arrives. Leon van Reinhardt. For Kangjiyama, Leon's arrival marks the true beginning of the story and the first step toward the collapse of 7 centuries of peace. Even before meeting him, Kangjiyama dislikes him. Leon is the perfect protagonist in every sense. He possesses exceptional charisma, natural talent, remarkable looks, and, most importantly, the legendary blessing of miracle. In other words, he is exactly the type of person destined to save the world. As expected, Leon's arrival immediately attracts attention. Students gather around him almost instantly. Many of the female students are captivated, and even several important figures within the academy seem interested. Among them are Rachel, niece of the Spear Saint, and Saki Ryo, daughter of the Bow Saint. Kangjiyama also knows that Abel von Nibelung will eventually become part of Leon's group. Watching everything unfold, he can only sigh. The story is progressing exactly as it did in the game. Leon smiles and greets the students around him. Kangjiyama does his best to ignore him. Then Leon briefly looks in his direction. For some reason, that friendly smile makes Kangjiyama uncomfortable. Even so, he quickly reminds himself of an important fact. The protagonist exists to solve these problems. As long as Leon succeeds, Kangjiyama only needs to survive. With that thought in mind, he returns to focusing on himself. Later, in the training hall, he practices sword swings. Unlike his sashimi knife, the longer training sword does not activate the blessing of the sword god. That allows him to focus entirely on learning the fundamentals. Regardless of his feelings toward the blessing, he knows he needs proper swordsmanship if he wants to survive. Earlier that day, Chloe approached him looking apologetic. She wanted to know whether she had done something wrong. Maintaining a calm expression had required considerable effort on his part. Although she offered to make up for it by cooking dinner together again, Kangjiyama could not forget the image of her advancing with a sword while radiating killing intent. The memory remains vivid enough that accepting another dinner invitation feels surprisingly dangerous. Instead of discussing food, he asked for something else. Swordsmanship lessons. The request catches Chloe off guard. After a brief moment of confusion, she happily agrees. Now, on the day of their training session, Kangjiyama arrives prepared. Chloe, however, arrives even earlier than planned. When she points out his supposed lateness, he immediately corrects her and notes that she simply arrived ahead of schedule. Chloe responds with an innocent smile. Watching her, Kangjiyama is once again reminded that she is both extremely skilled and unexpectedly approachable. Trying to focus on training, he hands her a wooden practice sword. Chloe tilts her head in confusion. She seems genuinely puzzled by the idea. Kangjiyama quickly explains that practice weapons are meant to prevent injuries during training. To his surprise, Chloe simply smiles and praises him for being considerate. Hearing that only makes him more convinced that asking for lessons was the right decision. The moment Chloe grips the wooden sword, Kangjiyama's confidence begins to fade. She swings effortlessly, producing sharp sounds as the blade cuts through the air. Every movement is precise and controlled. Watching her, Kangjiyama breaks into a cold sweat. The difference in skill is obvious. Once the sparring session begins, that gap becomes even clearer. Chloe's strikes are accurate, her movements smooth, and her attacks grow faster with each exchange. Kangjiyama manages to block several blows, but the force behind them leaves his arms trembling. Then a particularly powerful strike lands. His wooden sword shatters. Before either of them can react, the broken weapon triggers the blessing of the sword god. A dark aura immediately surrounds Kangjiyama. At the same time, a system message appears. His humanity is beginning to decrease. Inside his mental world, Kangjiyama suddenly finds himself back in the kitchen where he once worked. Confused, he wonders whether everything that happened at the academy was merely a dream. A fish rests on the counter in front of him. Remembering that he is supposed to prepare it, he reaches for a knife. One after another, every blade is rejected. Only the sashimi knife remains. Reluctantly, he picks it up. The moment he does, an overwhelming sense of comfort washes over him. Something dormant within him awakens. Then the system announces that the heat has been activated. Back in reality, Kongjiama's body begins moving on its own. His actions no longer seem guided by conscious thought. In an instant, he closes the distance between himself and Chloe. She barely manages to raise her weapon in time. Even so, the impact sends her flying backward. Coughing blood, Chloe struggles to regain her footing. Meanwhile, Kongjiama continues advancing. Consumed by the influence of the blessing, he shows no sign of stopping. Chloe repeatedly calls out to him, but he does not respond. Another attack follows. As she desperately shouts his name, something changes. Inside the mental world, Kongjiama finally notices that the fish in front of him is actually Chloe. Hearing her voice cuts through the confusion. The realization pulls him back to reality. Just as the next strike is about to land, he regains control and releases the weapon. The sword falls from his hand. Chloe, injured and exhausted, slowly opens her eyes. She had been preparing for the worst. Instead, she finds Kongjiama standing there. He helps steady her before quietly suggesting that they end the training session for the day. With that, he simply turns and walks away. Chloe remains standing there, confused and shaken by everything that happened. Later, while returning to her room, she reflects on the sparring match. What she witnessed was not simply strength. Kongjiama's fighting style felt entirely different. At certain moments, it seemed as though instinct alone controlled his movements. There was something dangerous hidden beneath the surface, something that even he appeared unable to control. The experience leaves a lasting impression on her. She had always known that Kongjiama possessed unusual abilities. Now she realizes the truth is far more unsettling. As she continues walking, someone suddenly calls out to her. The newcomer comments that she seems to be enjoying herself lately. Immediately, Chloe's expression changes. Standing before her is Knox, a second-year student and a member of her family. Chloe addresses him as her brother. Knox asks whether she has spent all her time at the academy associating with insignificant people. The remark instantly irritates her. Without hesitation, she tells him not to speak about others that way. Knox merely smirks. After hearing Kongjiama's name, he casually warns her that continued association with him could attract the attention of the Sicily family. In that case, Kongjiama might become a target. Chloe lowers her head for a moment before walking away. As she leaves, she calmly states that even if the entire family came after Kongjiama, it would not end well for them. The conversation ends there. Chloe disappears down the hallway, while Knox remains standing alone. Quietly, he repeats Kongjiama's name and begins thinking about him. Elsewhere, Kongjiama reaches a conclusion of his own. The power he received is not a blessing in any meaningful sense. The more he experiences it, the more it resembles a curse. The loss of control, the influence on his mind, and the dangers it creates are becoming impossible to ignore. Determined not to rely on the blessing of the sword god any longer than necessary, he becomes even more motivated to find proper equipment and a safer source of strength. The more Kongjiama reflects on the incident, the more disturbed he becomes. The blessing of the sword god is not simply granting him power. It is actively working against his will. When the blessing takes over, it does more than remove pain. It fills him with a strange sense of freedom while simultaneously stripping away his control. Deep down, he feels like a puppet whose strings are being pulled by something else. During the activation, a constant impulse echoes through his mind. It urges him to keep cutting, to cut deeper, and to destroy everything in front of him. For a brief moment during his fight with Chloe, he lost control completely. Only her desperate scream managed to break through the haze. The sound pulled his consciousness back, allowing him to glimpse fragments of that strange world connected to the blessing. Realizing what was happening, he immediately let go of the sword. His instincts told him that if he continued holding it, he might never regain control of himself. Ironically, the very person who once tried to kill him ended up saving him from something far worse. Although he is annoyed that the entire incident started because Chloe broke his training sword, he cannot deny that he is also grateful. Even after leaving the training grounds, one question remains. How is he supposed to prevent this from happening again? The blessing is becoming increasingly difficult to view as a blessing at all. Little by little, Kongjiama begins piecing together a frightening possibility. Every activation seems to consume a part of him. As someone who does not truly belong in this world, he already feels like an outsider. He never wanted power, fame, or heroism. All he wanted was an ordinary life. Minor problems and occasional dangers were manageable. This is different. Now, he realizes that something inside him is slowly trying to take over. Whatever he received is not a gift from a god. It is a curse that intends to consume him eventually. This mysterious power is known as the art of the reverse sky. 3 days pass. The story returns to the classroom. A purple-haired student tries to start a conversation with Chloe, but she only half listens. Her attention is elsewhere. Kangjiyama has not appeared at school. Earlier that day, she visited his room and knocked on the door. The only response she heard was the sound of painful groans from inside. Worried about causing trouble by forcing her way in, she ultimately left. As she sits in class, she realizes just how much time she spends thinking about him. Watching him from a distance has become a habit. Whether he is lost in thought, training, or simply sitting quietly, she often finds herself observing him. At some point, she lost track of how many times she had done it. She always tries to remain discreet, hoping he will never think of her as bothersome. The realization makes her miss him more than she expected. Another day passes. For days have gone by. During class, the instructor tells everyone to settle down. Because of the rain, outdoor training has been canceled and replaced with study sessions. Even so, the instructor cannot help noticing Kangjiyama's continued absence. Despite his concerns, he chooses to trust the student and patiently waits for his return. The class eventually begins studying. Sometime later, the instructor hears someone approaching the classroom. Assuming it is a late student, he casually wonders who would dare arrive this late. Then he looks up. A figure steps through the door. The instructor freezes. So do the students. Chloe immediately calls out to Kangjiyama, asking what happened. The reason for everyone's reaction becomes obvious. He looks completely different. The gentle and somewhat ordinary appearance he had before is gone. His expression is sharper, his presence heavier, and his overall appearance has changed enough to leave everyone stunned. Whispers quickly spread throughout the room. Some students question whether this is really the same special admission student. Others openly comment that he seems far more attractive than before. The sudden transformation captures everyone's attention. Unaware of the growing commotion around him, Kangjiyama simply walks to his seat. Then he sits down with an expression that makes it clear he is in no mood to talk to anyone. After class ends, the students head to the cafeteria for lunch. Chloe immediately approaches Kangjiyama. Having worried about him for days, she wants to know what happened and why he suddenly disappeared. Kangjiyama brushes it off, claiming it was nothing serious. Chloe points out that he was absent for several days and asks whether it had something to do with their sparring session. Trying to reassure her, he calmly explains that he was simply sick and thanks her for worrying about him. The response catches her off guard. Relieved, she admits she is glad he is all right. Of course, Kangjiyama knows she probably does not believe his explanation. The truth is far worse. The last 3 days were essentially a period of withdrawal. The backlash from the sword god's blessing left him physically and mentally exhausted. He spent most of that time confined to his room, barely able to move as waves of pain and convulsions tore through his body. Compared to everything he had experienced before, this suffering was on an entirely different level. It was the price of using that cursed power. The changes were not limited to pain, either. When he looked in the mirror, he noticed that his appearance had changed. His body looked thinner and more skeletal, and strands of his hair had begun turning white. To him, it was obvious. This was the cost of interfering with whatever entity stood behind the sword god's blessing. As he studies Chloe's expression, he realizes she blames herself. Since she was the last person to see him before his disappearance, she naturally assumes she played some role in what happened. Wanting to ease her guilt, Kangjiyama decides to change the subject. He casually asks whether her dinner invitation is still available. The question completely catches Chloe off guard. For a moment, she is so flustered that she does not even process what he said and asks him to repeat it. Before he can answer, she suddenly becomes excited and immediately agrees. The invitation is very much still available. Her reaction leaves no doubt that she is happy. Seeing that, Kangjiyama is satisfied. When she asks what he would like to eat, he requests fish. It is his favorite food, and after everything he has been through recently, the idea sounds especially appealing. As he starts explaining himself, something suddenly brushes against his neck. Turning his head, he notices an unusual plant emitting a strange energy. Confused, he follows the source and immediately notices someone standing nearby. Nox, the second-year student, is watching them with a faint smirk. Chloe's expression instantly changes. The fear on her face is impossible to miss. Seeing her reaction, Kangjiyama immediately asks whether she knows him. The two men lock eyes. Rather than avoiding the situation, Kangjiyama steps forward and bluntly asks Nox to stop staring and say whatever he came to say. Nox remains silent for a moment. His glowing red eyes immediately catch Kangjiyama's attention. Before the situation escalates, Chloe quickly tells Kangjiyama not to get involved and demands that Nox leave. Although she tries to sound firm, the trembling in her voice reveals how nervous she really is. Nox barely acknowledges the warning. Instead, he comments that Kangjiyama does not seem particularly impressive and asks whether Chloe truly intends to break family rules because of him. Chloe immediately responds that she no longer has anything to do with the Sicily family. Nox disagrees. According to him, a person cannot escape the blood they were born with. No matter how far she runs, she will always belong to the family. Listening to the exchange, Kangjiyama quickly realizes he is witnessing a family conflict. Nox continues pressing the issue, insisting that Chloe abandon this distraction and return home. The moment he refers to Kangjiyama as a thing, however, Chloe immediately snaps at him. For someone usually cheerful, her reaction is surprisingly intense. Watching from the side, Kangjiyama begins recalling what he knows about the Sicily family from the game. They were a secretive organization that appeared midway through the story. Although they lacked the overwhelming military strength of the major heroic houses, they were unmatched in assassination and covert operations. Every child born into the family endured brutal training from an early age. Their purpose was simple: to become weapons. Given everything he knows, Kangjiyama cannot help thinking that Nox actually behaves exactly how he would expect someone from the Sicily family to act. If anything, Chloe is the unusual one. Despite her upbringing, she somehow remained cheerful and approachable. Nox, on the other hand, carries himself like someone who would not hesitate to kill if necessary. Kangjiyama knows that the Sicily family maintains order through fear and elimination of threats. He does not necessarily oppose killing when circumstances demand it. What troubles him is something else. Standing beside him, Chloe is trembling. She is biting her lip hard enough to draw blood. For the first time, Kangjiyama fully understands her situation. More than anything, Chloe simply wants to live a normal life. Unfortunately, just like his own cursed blessing, her circumstances are not something she can easily escape. The Sicily family shaped her entire life, and no matter how far she runs, that shadow continues to follow her. Kangjiyama knows he is not a hero. He has never wanted to become one, nor does he intend to start now. Still, he believes there is a difference between saving the world and helping a single person. Looking at Chloe trembling beside him, he asks himself why he is getting involved. The answer comes surprisingly easily. He wants to help her. He wants to resolve this problem with Nox. Even if the power he carries is a curse, he refuses to let it turn him into someone who runs away from everything. Turning toward Nox, Kangjiyama finally addresses him directly. The name sounds familiar. At the same time, he finds himself thinking about his own situation. For so long, he has tried to escape the sword god's blessing and avoid the path laid out before him. But no matter how hard he tries, he keeps finding himself pulled back. Eventually, he reaches a simple conclusion. Running away is not working. If escape is impossible, then the only option left is to move forward. His own name suddenly comes to mind. Geometry means sword. Ma means demon. For someone called Sword Demon, fate seems to have a strange sense of humor. With that thought, he openly declares his intention to defeat Nox. Elsewhere in the academy, Li Wanbin sits alone, deep in thought. He can tell something happened to Kangjiyama during his disappearance. The boy's expression has changed noticeably, becoming colder and more distant than before. While he is considering the matter, another instructor enters and casually teases him, joking that his constant frown will eventually make him bald. The remark immediately irritates him. Before the conversation can continue, a call suddenly comes through. His expression changes at once. As he listens, he becomes increasingly alarmed. A duel has been arranged inside a subspace arena. The participants are Kangjiyama and Nox. Meanwhile, preparations are already underway. There are only 15 minutes remaining before the match begins. Kanjiyama is honestly surprised by how quickly everything was approved. Metapoison personally helped arrange the duel after he requested it, though she made it clear that once it began, he would be on his own. The advantage of the subspace is that no permanent physical injuries will occur. Mental exhaustion, however, is another matter entirely. Even knowing that, Kanjiyama remains determined. As the start approaches, he can already hear the noise of the crowd gathering outside. The situation feels absurd. Not long ago, his greatest goal was avoiding attention. Now half the academy seems interested in watching him fight. Nearby, Chloe struggles to hold back tears. She repeatedly blames herself for what is happening. Kanjiyama quickly stops her. He insists that none of this is her fault. He even thanks her for lending him equipment for the duel. For a moment, silence settles between them. Then Chloe quietly warns him. Nox is extremely strong. Kanjiyama casually points out that she is strong as well. Chloe shakes her head. According to her, Nox is different. Within the Sicily family, he is considered a genius unlike any they have produced before. His mastery of the family's techniques is already approaching a level few can match. Listening to the explanation, Kanjiyama internally cringes at all the grand titles and dramatic descriptions. Then again, this world has always been full of people with ridiculous reputations and heroic nicknames. At this point, there is no use complaining about it. He is already part of the story. As the duel announcement echoes through the arena, Kanjiyama rises to his feet. Chloe still looks worried. Seeing her hesitation, he calls her name. Then he reassures her. The world is filled with geniuses. That is precisely why he intends to win. With those words, he heads toward the arena. The massive doors slowly open. The sight beyond immediately catches him off guard. The arena is packed. Thousands of spectators fill the stands. This is far more than a simple duel. For a moment, Kanjiyama feels less like a student and more like a gladiator entering a coliseum. Scanning the crowd, he notices many influential students and academy elites in attendance. Even Abel von Nibelung is there. The realization leaves him speechless. He cannot understand why so many people are interested in watching this match. Unfortunately, there is no time to think about it. A familiar presence suddenly appears across the arena. Nox has arrived. Unlike Kanjiyama, he looks openly irritated. His patience seems to have already run out. As the two face each other, Nox questions whether Kanjiyama understands the difference between courage and arrogance. His attention then shifts toward Kanjiyama's weapon. The blade appears unimpressive compared to what most academy elites would carry. At that moment, a dark pressure begins spreading from Nox. Kanjiyama immediately recognizes it for what it is. Killing intent. The duel has not even started yet, and Nox is already making his hostility clear. Kanjiyama calmly responds that a true fighter does not blame their equipment. The remark only irritates Nox further. Deciding to end the duel quickly, Nox summons a crow behind him and declares that he will begin by cutting out Kanjiyama's insolent tongue. Kanjiyama immediately notices the weapon in Nox's hand. The blade is absurdly powerful. It is the Hong Ryan blade, an S-rank weapon. Even he has to admit that the equipment is impressive. Still, he cannot complain. After all, he entered the arena carrying nothing more than a sashimi knife borrowed from Chloe's kitchen. Moments later, the drone overseeing the duel approaches the center of the arena. A blue light spreads through the battlefield as it officially announces the start of combat and wishes both participants the blessings of the heroes. The duel begins. Without hesitation, Kanjiyama activates pain negation and calls upon the blessing of the sword god. His eyes turn white as the power takes hold. The sudden change immediately catches the audience's attention. Many spectators exchange confused looks. What was expected to be a one-sided match suddenly feels very different. The battle explodes into motion. The two clash repeatedly, exchanging attacks at a speed that surprises even experienced observers. Rachel, watching from the stands, remarks that both fighters are moving much faster than expected. Nearby, Abel is equally shocked. The seemingly weak student she met earlier is somehow keeping up with Nox. Nox launches another attack. One strike tears through the arena floor, sending purple slashes racing toward Kanjiyama. Yet the attack misses entirely. Nox follows up by leaping into the air and activating the three-headed crow technique. Dark purple energy surrounds him, as the technique descends toward Kong-Jiyama. Certain of victory, Nox assumes the fight is over. Instead, Kong-Jiyama vanishes. A blue blur streaks across the arena. An instant later, he reappears on the opposite side, completely unharmed. The crowd erupts into discussion. Despite Nox's overwhelming offensive power, Kong-Jiyama continues, avoiding every attack. Abel watches closely, unable to understand what she is seeing. Someone who recently entered the academy should not be capable of matching a fighter like Nox. More importantly, Kong-Jiyama does not appear to be struggling. He is simply dodging everything. Even Nox begins recalling Chloe's warning. At first, he assumed Kong-Jiyama was merely relying on speed. Since he has not launched a serious counterattack yet, Nox concludes that his opponent may simply specialize in agility. For the moment, he decides to wait for an opening. Unfortunately, every second increases his frustration. The sight of someone fighting him with kitchen knives only makes it worse. Then something unexpected happens. One of Kong-Jiyama's knives falls to the ground. Nox immediately demands to know what he is doing. In response, Kong-Jiyama slowly extends his arm. The remaining knife points directly toward Nox. The weapon even carries a small floral decoration on its handle. The strange stance leaves Nox completely confused. For several seconds, neither side moves. Convinced that Kong-Jiyama is preparing to gamble everything on a single attack, Nox resolves to unleash his full power. As he begins boasting about the superiority of the Hong Ryan blade, Kong-Jiyama suddenly disappears. The movement is so fast that Nox barely registers it. At that moment, Kong-Jiyama reaches a decision. For a long time, he wanted nothing more than a quiet and comfortable life. He wanted to avoid attention, avoid conflict, and blend into the background. But reality has made one thing clear. There is no escaping the path in front of him. If he cannot avoid it, then he will cut through it. A flash appears. An arm flies through the air. Nox does not even realize what happened. By the time he reacts, Kong-Jiyama is already standing behind him. The audience falls silent. No one can believe what they just witnessed. Meanwhile, Kong-Jiyama continues moving forward. Whether his power is a blessing or a curse no longer matters. He intends to use every tool available to survive. The dream of a peaceful future is slipping further away with every battle. Another slash follows. This time, genuine fear appears on Nox's face. A second strike lands. The arena erupts with a violent shockwave that sweeps across the battlefield. When the dust settles, Nox collapses motionless onto the ground. Across the arena, stunned silence spreads through the crowd as everyone struggles to process what they have just seen. Meanwhile, Kong-Jiyama calmly sheaths his convenience store knife. The sight leaves the audience speechless. Abel watches in shock while Rachel stares with heart-shaped eyes, completely focused on him. With that, the duel officially comes to an end. The arena erupts into cheers. Kong-Jiyama expected something like this. After everything that happened, there is no longer any way to remain unnoticed. He had just defeated Nox using nothing more than a knife meant for preparing fish. Even so, the victory brings him little satisfaction. He knows firsthand that cutting through flesh is not a pleasant experience. At least the subspace restores its participants. Nox lies nearby with his body intact, a reminder of how extraordinary the system truly is. Despite the victory, Kong-Jiyama feels mentally exhausted. He readily admits that Nox was as strong as Chloe claimed. The second year possessed excellent combat instincts and battle sense. The problem was his killing intent. Every attack carried obvious hostility, making his movements easier to predict. Above the arena, the drone announces the result. The winner is Kong-Jiyama. Total combat time, 26 seconds. The crowd is stunned. A first-year student has just defeated a second-year from the Sicily family. Attention immediately shifts toward Kong-Jiyama. He understands what that means. There is no hiding anymore. Since fate insists on dragging him into the spotlight, he decides he may as well move forward instead of resisting it. Over the following days, the academy can talk about little else. Every conversation eventually returns to the same topic. The first-year student who defeated Nox. Students struggle to understand how someone seemingly ordinary could overwhelm a fighter from one of the most feared families in the academy. Meanwhile, Abel finds herself unable to stop thinking about the duel. No matter where she goes, she keeps hearing Kong-Jiyama's name. The memory refuses to leave her mind. When Nox's arm flew through the air during the fight, she had frozen in place. More than the result itself, she could not comprehend the swordsmanship behind it. Kangjiyama had achieved that level of precision using kitchen knives. For someone raised by the sword emperor himself, the realization is deeply unsettling. A memory suddenly resurfaces. Not long ago, she had confidently declared that she wanted to find the person who surpassed her and defeat them. She had even explained her personal struggles to Kangjiyama because she assumed he was weak and harmless. Now all those conversations return to haunt her. As the pieces begin falling into place, she starts suspecting the truth. What if the mysterious top student was him all along? The realization leaves her mortified. Her face grows red as she mutters to herself, frustrated that the person she had looked down on might actually be stronger than her. More than anything, she wants to understand what was going through his mind during that duel. Nearby, Rachel notices her unusual behavior. Curious, she asks what is wrong. Abel immediately claims that nothing happened. Rachel is not convinced. She keeps guessing possible explanations. Maybe Abel forgot something. Maybe she is hungry. Maybe she is tired. Each suggestion is quickly rejected. Then Rachel casually asks whether it involves a boy. The reaction is immediate. Abel turns bright red. Rachel instantly realizes she hit the mark. Delighted by the discovery, she bursts into laughter. The idea that the famous Abel von Nibelung might be interested in someone is simply too entertaining to ignore. Abel desperately tries to deny it, insisting that Rachel is misunderstanding everything. Rachel ignores the protests. Now, fully invested, she starts listing possible candidates. Her first guess is Leon. After all, he is handsome, talented, and popular. The moment she mentions his name, Abel's expression makes it obvious that she is completely wrong. That only increases Rachel's curiosity. After thinking for a moment, she throws out another possibility. Could it be that special admissions student from yesterday? The instant Kangjiyama's name leaves her mouth, Abel freezes. That reaction tells Rachel everything she needs to know. Thrilled by her own deduction, she immediately declares herself a genius. Before Abel can stop her, Rachel grabs her by the hand and drags her away. Moments later, they burst into a classroom. The students inside instantly fall silent. Several of them stare openly at the two girls. Rachel completely ignores the attention. Without hesitation, she climbs onto a desk and loudly demands to know where the black-haired guy is. The entire room turns toward her. One student points out that standing on classroom furniture is inappropriate regardless of who she is. Rachel casually dismisses the complaint, arguing that she is attractive enough to get away with it. To everyone's surprise, the student immediately agrees. Off to the side, Abel can only stand there in embarrassment, wishing she could disappear. Suddenly, Rachel's expression changes. A mischievous grin spreads across her face. She announces that she found him. The reason for her excitement becomes obvious almost immediately. She notices Chloe staring at Kangjiyama with unmistakably affectionate eyes. Instead of losing interest, Rachel seems even more entertained. To her, this only makes the situation more interesting. She casually adjusts her uniform and starts approaching. Chloe immediately senses something strange and instinctively stiffens. Meanwhile, Rachel walks right up to Kangjiyama and studies him at close range. Abel and Chloe both look completely confused. Rachel simply acts as though nothing unusual is happening. At that moment, Kangjiyama finally notices the commotion. Still half distracted, he looks up and immediately wonders why Rachel is standing in front of him. Rachel openly comments that he looks better up close. For some reason, every survival instinct in Kangjiyama's body starts warning him. Before he can react further, Chloe suddenly steps forward. She grabs Rachel's arm and demands to know what she is doing. Her expression is noticeably colder than usual. Rachel looks surprised. She had not expected this reaction. Only then does Kangjiyama realize what his instincts have been trying to tell him. Chloe's mood has shifted. Without warning, she produces a dagger. The atmosphere changes instantly. Kangjiyama cannot remember anything remotely like this happening in the original game. Before things escalate, Abel quickly intervenes and asks Rachel what she thinks she is doing. Rachel casually claims she only came to greet someone. Then she walks over and lightly pats Chloe on the head while suggesting she calm down and put away the weapon. Chloe does not listen. She immediately attacks. Rachel reacts effortlessly. For a brief moment, everyone assumes something terrible happened. Instead, it turns out Rachel blocked the strike with absurd ease. She then casually criticizes Chloe's movements and points out every flaw she noticed. The comments only make the situation more awkward. Rachel restrains Chloe's arm until Abel finally tells her to stop. Rachel releases her by tossing her backward. Chloe lands safely and regains her balance almost immediately. Meanwhile, several students are completely absorbed in the unexpected drama. The reason for Rachel's confidence quickly becomes obvious. She comes from the Spear Saints family, a clan that values overwhelming strength above everything else. After calming down, Rachel turns back to Kangjiyama and directly asks whether Chloe is his girlfriend. Kangjiyama immediately says no. The answer visibly disappoints Chloe. Trying to soften it slightly, he clarifies that they are simply friends. At the same time, he is still trying to understand how his peaceful classroom somehow turned into this. Only then does he notice Abel standing nearby. Confused, he asks why they came looking for him in the first place. Rachel immediately answers. According to her, Abel became curious about him, and she wanted to see the person herself. The moment she says that, Abel turns bright red. She immediately denies everything. Unfortunately, the more she explains, the less convincing she sounds. Eventually, she gives up and insists that the whole thing is a misunderstanding. Completely unaffected, Kangjiyama simply tells her that if that is the case, she is free to leave. Rachel pauses. For some reason, his reaction only seems to interest her more. She openly comments that she likes people who respond like that. Kangjiyama immediately rejects the idea and says he's not that interesting. Rachel ignores the rejection. Instead, she casually invites him to visit her dorm after class. Her wording leaves very little room for interpretation. The moment she says it, Chloe immediately reacts and demands that Rachel stop touching Kangjiyama. Rachel bursts into laughter. She finds Chloe's reaction surprisingly entertaining and jokes that she sounds like she thinks Kangjiyama belongs to her. At that point, Abel finally loses patience. She calls out to Rachel, clearly trying to stop the situation before it becomes even more chaotic. Rachel eventually stands up and brushes herself off. With a playful smile, she tells Kangjiyama that she enjoyed meeting him and says she will see him again later. Then she leaves. The moment the group turns around, Kangjiyama immediately loses interest and goes back to resting. Before leaving completely, Abel pauses. She glances back at him for a brief moment before quietly following Rachel out. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Rachel remains unusually thoughtful. At first, she assumed Kangjiyama was simply cold or indifferent. Now she realizes that was not it. When he looked at her, she felt something entirely different. For a moment, she genuinely felt as though she were standing in front of someone who could cut her down without hesitation. The feeling caught her off guard. She originally approached him out of curiosity and expected to amuse herself. Instead, she encountered someone far more interesting than she expected. Coming from a Spear Saints family, she has always been raised to value exceptional strength and talent. Naturally, her evaluation of people tend to follow that mindset. Now she begins viewing Kangjiyama as someone unusually valuable. With a teasing tone, she comments that she understands why someone like Abel would become interested in him. Abel immediately dismisses the idea. Rachel then casually apologizes. Abel assumes she means causing trouble in class and says she should apologize to the students instead. Rachel shakes her head. That is not what she means. Her apology is directed toward Abel. Because if someone like Kangjiyama is truly that interesting, Rachel intends to pursue her own curiosity. Elsewhere, in the Academy hospital, Knox finally wakes up. The first thing that enters his mind is revenge. Before the duel, he had always been known as the pride of the Sicily family. Defeat was something he had never experienced. At first, anger overwhelms him. He considers sneaking into Kangjiyama's dorm and settling everything directly. Then he remembers the feeling from the duel. That overwhelming presence. The memory makes him hesitate. Still unwilling to accept defeat, Knox leaves his room and decides he will reclaim both his pride and his family's position. At the same time, he thinks about bringing Chloe back as well. With his abilities being strongest at night, He convinces himself that now is the perfect opportunity. Determined, he opens the door, then freezes. Someone is already inside. Kangjiyama is casually sitting there eating an apple. The sight is so unexpected that Nox cannot react. Kangjiyama looks up and calmly asks what his senior is doing there. Nox has no answer. The scene briefly shifts back. Earlier, Chloe had been quietly sitting while nervously biting her nails. Kangjiyama noticed she seemed frustrated. At first, he assumed she still felt guilty. Instead, she had been thinking about something completely different. Her thoughts had drifted toward Rachel. Judging by her expression, she clearly did not appreciate the attention Rachel showed him. Noticing her mood worsening, Kangjiyama quickly changes the subject. He asks how Nox is doing. Chloe hesitates before answering. She explains that Nox is currently staying in the medical wing. That surprises Kangjiyama. As far as he remembers, Nox did not appear seriously injured. Chloe casually replies that she has not visited him personally, but heard he was admitted despite showing no obvious wounds. She tells him not to worry and assumes he is fine. Kangjiyama is not convinced. Nox does not strike him as someone who would quietly accept defeat. With that concern in mind, he asks Chloe where Nox's room is. Back in the present, Nox remains standing in disbelief. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama casually continues eating. Then he suddenly asks whether it is all right to eat the apple. Nox stares at him. The question makes no sense considering he is already halfway through it. Ignoring the confusion, Kangjiyama comments that the Sicily family must be wealthy if they provide rooms like this. Still unable to understand the situation, Nox asks how he even got inside. Kangjiyama does not answer. Instead, he reaches for a knife. Nox immediately becomes tense. For a moment, he wonders whether Kangjiyama came to finish what he started. Instead, Kangjiyama calmly begins slicing the apple. Each cut is clean and precise. Watching him work, Nox finds himself strangely distracted. The skill looks absurdly refined for something so ordinary. Once he finishes, Kangjiyama places the neatly prepared fruit on the desk. Then he casually remarks that fruit can help when digestion is not great. Nox immediately understands how ridiculous the situation is. His expression twists. He reaches for his weapon, not because of fear, because somehow this feels more insulting than the duel itself. Nox reaches for his weapon. Then Kangjiyama calmly says something that immediately stops him. If Nox ever considers revenge again, Kangjiyama will personally come for the entire Sicily family. The words leave the room silent. Nox stares at him, unable to respond. Without explaining further, Kangjiyama walks to the door, opens it, and leaves. Once outside, he finally exhales. A faint smile appears on his face. Quietly, he compares Nox to a candle that could be extinguished at any time. Of course, he knows that statement was mostly a bluff. There is no realistic way he could wipe out an entire family in 30 seconds. Maybe he could create damage. Maybe he could take down a few people. But the truth is much simpler. He wants to avoid unnecessary fighting. As he walks through the corridor, Kangjiyama reflects on how strange his life has become. None of this was part of his original plan. Still, little by little, he is getting used to standing in the middle of chaos. At times, he even wonders whether this world is affecting his own thinking. For now, though, he hopes the warning was enough. If Nox backs down, then one problem disappears. Unfortunately, Kangjiyama's biggest concern lies elsewhere. There is still the unpredictable heroine who originally should have been interacting with the protagonist instead of him. More importantly, another event is approaching. The upcoming competition. This one matters. The reward is the B-rank sword Murasame. More than prestige, Kangjiyama wants the weapon because he desperately needs something that lets him fight without relying entirely on the sword god's blessing. His current problem is obvious. 30 seconds is not enough. This next examination will involve defeating demonic monsters in groups of 5. Unlike previous tests, individual performance matters less than coordination and teamwork. That means allies are essential. Fortunately, Kangjiyama remembers this event from the game. The monsters will be dark mermen. Unfortunately, he also remembers how irritating they were to fight. Back then, they were just enemies on a screen. Now he has to imagine fighting them in person. At least they are not sirens. Those are far worse. According to the game's world building, sirens are classified as demonic humans, while mermen are categorized as demonic monsters. Compared to sirens, mermen are considered manageable. Later that evening, Kong sits alone on a bench. It has already been 1 month since he arrived in this world. The calm atmosphere reminds him of the quiet life he originally hoped to build. 700 years have passed since the peace treaty between humanity and the demons. Yet peace has never truly meant peace. There have always been conflicts. He remembers events like the Vastman dispute 50 years ago and the incident involving the 6th Legion commander attempting to revive the 1st Legion commander. Fragments of history pass through his mind. Scenes of battles. Heroes fighting. Meta shouting orders. Young warriors cutting through armies. Humanity survived and eventually produced the 7 heroes, though victory came with heavy losses. Those sacrifices created the long period of relative stability that followed. Even then, some people still mocked the heroes and questioned whether defeating a single commander truly justified calling someone humanity's strongest. Sitting quietly, Kong asks himself whether this is really the peace everyone fought to protect. The more he thinks about it, the more he remembers another figure. Valor Jacqueline, the hero who sealed away the 1st Legion leader. And according to the story he remembers, 3 years from now, the demons will attack again. That conflict will mark the appearance of the Demon King and the beginning of another war. Thinking about it endlessly will not change anything. Right now, there's only one thing he can control: the upcoming examination. To clear it, he needs allies. That realization immediately creates a new problem. He opens his phone. His contact list is completely empty. No friends, no team, nothing. Then an idea finally occurs to him. Whether he likes it or not, he has become famous around the academy. If things have already reached this point, then maybe he should take advantage of it. If he's going to participate, he might as well recruit the strongest teammates possible and aim for the highest score. He still wants a comfortable life, even if achieving it quietly is no longer an option. A week passes. Kong spends most of it quietly waiting. And waiting. Not a single person invites him to join a team. This leaves him completely confused. After everything that happened with Nox, he assumed people would at least approach him out of interest. Instead, nobody comes. Thinking back to the duel, he suddenly realizes the truth. People are avoiding him because they are scared. From their perspective, he is the first year who defeated a second year from the Sicily family using kitchen knives. Looking around the classroom, he notices something else. Chloe is in the same situation. Like him, she has not joined any group. Approaching her, he asks whether she found a team. She quietly admits she has not. Kong finds that strange. She used to talk with other classmates. After thinking for a moment, he makes a simple suggestion. If neither of them has a team, they can just form one together. They only need 3 more members. Chloe agrees immediately. Her response comes so quickly that Kong briefly wonders whether she had already decided before he asked. Still, he has no complaints. She is strong enough to compensate for his own limitations. Considering he can only fight seriously for around 30 seconds, having Chloe nearby feels reassuring. In his mind, she is worth more than an entire squad of average students. Chloe looks unusually happy. Unfortunately, their peaceful moment does not last. Someone loudly calls out Kong name. Rachel has arrived. She announces her return as if she never left. Kong immediately regrets making eye contact. When he asks why she is here, she casually replies that she already explained herself before. Nearby, Chloe quietly mutters something under her breath while staring at Rachel. Kong ignores that and asks Rachel to stop playing around and explain what she wants. Rachel dramatically acts hurt and asks why he's always so cold. Kong immediately tells her to stop giving him strange nicknames. Rachel pretends not to hear. Then she somehow manages to stumble dramatically onto a desk. Kong refuses to react. Eventually, Rachel gets to the point. She asks whether he already formed a team for the upcoming exam. Without thinking, he says no. Rachel immediately lights up. She invites him to join her group. Before he can react, she acts like the decision has already been made. Kong pulls away and asks why she would recruit him when she probably has endless options. Rachel casually replies that it sounds more entertaining this way. Kong explains that he already plans to team up with Chloe. Rachel immediately accepts that answer. According to her, that simply means their group now has 2 members. Kong Jiama stares at her. Is she seriously risking her own ranking? Looking toward Chloe, he notices she seems perfectly fine with the arrangement. After thinking briefly, he reluctantly agrees. Rachel immediately celebrates and announces there is no turning back now. Curious, Kong Jiama asks who else she recruited. Rachel smiles and asks whether he knows someone named Leon. Kong Jiama freezes. Of all people, Leon, the protagonist, the exact person he wanted to avoid. He silently wonders what kind of past life karma led him here. He spent decades preparing fish and somehow ended up caught between Leon, Rachel, Abel, and the rest of the main cast. The girls themselves are not the problem. Leon is. As the protagonist, his existence threatens everything Kong Jiama thought he understood about the story. For a moment, he seriously considers withdrawing. Unfortunately, Rachel moves faster. The instant he agrees, she submits the team registration. It is done. For the first time in a while, Kong Jiama genuinely feels the urge to cut something. Chloe notices his expression and asks whether something is wrong. She comments that ever since Rachel arrived, he has seemed distracted. Kong Jiama brushes it off and says he is simply surprised by the team composition. Chloe reassures him. In her opinion, nobody on the team should be stronger than him anyway. That statement makes him pause. After thinking about it, he decides there's no point backing out. He invited Chloe himself, and realistically, there probably is not a stronger lineup available. Maybe he should stop overthinking and focus on clearing the exam. He asks when the meeting is. Chloe tells him the schedule. The blonde girl arranged for everyone to meet at 6 in the cafeteria. Later that day, they arrive at a coffee shop suspiciously similar to a famous chain. Chloe excitedly enjoys her drink. Meanwhile, Kong Jiama nearly chokes after seeing the price. Watching someone casually drink something that expensive feels painful. Trying to save money, he orders the cheapest espresso available. Even then, he regrets it. While enduring the drink, his phone vibrates. It is Rachel. She claims she has already arrived and asks where he is. Kong Jiama tells her to stop pretending and come inside. A short while later, Rachel finally enters. Walking beside her is Leon. Rachel looks around, spots Kong Jiama and Chloe, and casually asks whether they have been waiting long. Leon, however, keeps his eyes on Kong Jiama. Kong Jiama looks back and immediately notices the orange-haired guy standing beside Leon. His first impression is simple. He expected someone like Abel to be here, not someone who looked more like a troublemaker. Leon approaches first and introduces himself naturally. He acknowledges Kong Jiama's duel against Nox and gives brief recognition to his performance. While listening, Kong Jiama studies him quietly. Leon carries himself with effortless confidence. Everything about him matches the image of someone born to stand at the center of the story. Everyone takes their seats. The introductions begin. Leon briefly explains that he is from the star class and is leading the team. Kong Jiama feels a quiet sense of envy. Leon has talent, status, and looks that seem unfairly perfect. Rachel skips her introduction since everyone already knows her and immediately moves the meeting forward. Next comes the orange-haired student. He introduces himself as Speed Weapon and mentions he is also from the star class. Kong Jiama internally questions whether that is actually a name or some sort of title. The strange tattoo on his neck does not help. Then it becomes Chloe's turn. She introduces herself as Chloe Cicely from the Wolf class and casually mentions that she joined through Kong Jiama. Rachel reacts with obvious amusement and lightly teases the situation. Chloe briefly shows her irritation, but quickly regains composure and greets everyone properly. Soon all attention shifts to Kong Jiama. He keeps things short and introduces himself simply as another Wolf class student. An awkward silence follows. Someone opens a laptop and the meeting officially begins. A holographic island appears above the table. Leon explains that the professors provided the team leaders with information earlier that day. The map displays the examination site. Transportation will happen through subspace, but the island itself exists in reality. Any injuries caused by monsters will remain real. Leon zooms into the northern section. That is where their team will operate. 3 other groups will also compete in nearby areas. The objective is straightforward. Eliminate as many dark mermen as possible. Since the number of targets is limited, teamwork and efficiency will determine the outcome. After explaining everything, Leon opens the floor for questions. Speed Weapon immediately becomes curious about whether sirens inhabit the island and whether they pose any danger. Leon reassures everyone that the professors already completed their assessment and determined the area was safe. Chloe asks another practical question regarding whether teams can interfere with one another. Leon explains that deliberate obstruction would go against the exam's purpose and would likely result in penalties. Kangjiyama quietly notes that this rule probably makes the event less appealing for someone trained as an assassin. With that, the meeting ends. People begin leaving one by one. Leon stays behind to organize his materials. Eventually, only he and Kangjiyama remain. Kangjiyama quietly prepares to leave unnoticed. Before he can step out, Leon stops him. Then comes an unexpected question. Leon asks where he is from. The question sounds ordinary, yet something about it feels unusual. Leon watches him carefully. Kangjiyama cannot explain why, but it feels like Leon is asking about more than birthplace. He starts thinking about how to respond. Before he says anything, Leon dismisses the moment himself. He admits the question was sudden and explains that for some reason he felt an unusual sense of familiarity. That answer only confuses Kangjiyama more. There is nothing especially unusual about him. People from different regions exist in this world. Nothing about his appearance should stand out. So why did Leon ask? Leon lets the topic go and starts heading toward the exit. But before he can leave, Kangjiyama reaches out and stops him. Even he does not fully understand why he did it. Without fully understanding why, Kangjiyama stops Leon and asks the same question back. Leon briefly looks surprised. After a short pause, he gives a simple answer and calmly removes Kangjiyama's hand before leaving. Kangjiyama remains standing there. The interaction leaves him strangely unsettled. Almost immediately, he starts questioning himself. Was he reading too much into it? Why did he feel compelled to ask in the first place? Then a strange thought appears. Could Leon also be someone from another world? The idea sounds ridiculous. Still, he cannot dismiss it completely. If someone had to end up inside this world, taking over the protagonist would make far more sense than ending up in the body of some random background character. His eyes drift toward his blade. He remembers something. Whenever he uses its power, his instincts sharpen and his thoughts become unusually clear. Wanting to test his suspicion, he focuses on Leon's existence. Almost immediately, he feels something familiar. A faint presence. A sensation that feels like a distant voice. But the effect comes with overwhelming pain. A headache crashes into him so violently that even pain negation struggles to suppress it. After enduring it for a moment, he reaches a conclusion. Leon is exactly the same as he was in the game. Everything matches perfectly. Even the original creator could not have reproduced him any more accurately. And yet, Leon saying they felt similar continues bothering him. Determined to find something, Kangjiyama searches for information on Leon. Nothing useful appears. He quietly regrets ignoring every male character's backstory while playing. At the time, he only cared about progressing the story. Now he has no information when he actually needs it. Eventually, he tries to calm himself. Crossing paths once should not change anything. If something similar happens again, he decides he will ask Meta for advice. At the same time, he notices something else. Recently, he has been reacting differently to situations. Normally, he would avoid attention and confrontation. Now he feels noticeably calmer. That thought makes him check his status. The numbers immediately catch his attention. His assimilation rate has risen. The increase is much larger than any other stat. Mental strength and weapon mastery remain mostly unchanged. His physical ability improved slightly through training. He assumes weapon mastery will grow further after obtaining Murasame. But assimilation continues increasing at an unusual pace. Trying to understand it, he retraces his recent actions. The only major events were his fights with Nox and Chloe. Maybe they are connected. Unfortunately, he has no way to verify it. Then another system notification appears. Because a certain number of blessings has been reached, adjustments are being applied. Kangjiyama watches the changes carefully. His pain negation increases. Instead of lasting 30 seconds, it now lasts 40. For the first time in a while, he feels rewarded for all the suffering. The feeling of growth is strangely satisfying. Time passes quickly after that. Training, group meetings, sword practice with Chloe, repeatedly avoiding Rachel whenever she appears. Days disappear faster than expected. Eventually, only one day remains. Kong pushes himself harder than ever. His training becomes almost obsessive. Each movement becomes sharper, each swing more precise. By the end, he feels prepared. Then exam day arrives. Standing before him is an enormous subspace gate. Unlike the training versions, this one feels heavier and more imposing. Someone calls his name. Turning around, he sees the entire team already assembled. Everyone is fully equipped. Rachel stands out immediately. Her oversized weapon draws attention even before she does. As always, she greets him with playful energy and acts as though he kept everyone waiting. Leon signals for the group to move. Speed Weapon remains silent. Chloe welcomes Kong naturally as he joins them. Walking with the team, Kong begins examining everyone's equipment. Rachel carries an S-rank halberd known for its destructive power. Leon still does not possess the legendary weapon from the original story. Meanwhile, Speed Weapon wears a strange tube-like device across his chest. Kong studies it for a moment. Speed Weapon immediately notices and reacts defensively. Rachel casually explains. It is a healing support artifact. And not just any artifact, an S-rank one. The price alone must be absurd. Kong quietly admires it. Speed Weapon, however, makes it clear that touching it is not an option. A voice suddenly echoes across the area and announces the beginning of the examination. One of the professors addresses the cadets before departure. Although everyone appears prepared, the reminder is simple. They are still students, not heroes. The exam is important, but unnecessary risks are not worth taking, and anyone injured can withdraw at any time. After the announcement, Leon naturally steps forward and gathers the team's attention. He encourages everyone to focus and do their best. For Kong the moment he had been preparing for had finally arrived. Even so, something feels unusual. Chloe seems distracted. When he asks about it, she admits she has a bad feeling. More specifically, she is uneasy about the possibility of sirens appearing. Kong reminds her that the instructors already inspected the island. There should not be anything unexpected waiting for them. Later, he learns why she reacted that way. Her homeland had once suffered heavily from siren attacks. The concern was never irrational. Soon the instructors signal everyone to enter. As they approach the gate, Kong casually ruffles Chloe's hair and encourages her to stop worrying. The reaction is immediate. Chloe stiffens and becomes visibly flustered before quietly following the group. Moments later, they cross the gate. For a brief instant, Chloe hears someone calling her name. The sensation feels strangely distant. When she snaps back, Kong is already looking at her. She realizes she had lost focus. Meanwhile, the group is discussing communication and emergency procedures inside subspace. Someone nearby is already collapsed from transport sickness. Then, everything changes. The nightmare begins. A siren appears. Earlier, before that moment, the group had successfully arrived at Scalpel Island. The trip affected almost everyone. Most of the team ended up nauseous after crossing. Only Kong remained completely unaffected. Leon notices and seems mildly impressed. Kong simply attributes it to never getting motion sickness. Before they can recover, their first dark merman appears. Kong stares at it. Compared to what he imagined from the game, it looks surprisingly small. For a second, he feels embarrassed for treating this exam so seriously. Leon quickly explains. These are merely the smallest variants. The deeper they move toward the center, the larger and more dangerous the creatures become. Before advancing further, their first objective is locating Chloe. She had moved ahead earlier to scout. The team enters the forest. Leon tells everyone to remain alert and mentions that she should be nearby. Suddenly, something drops from above. A red blur descends through the trees. Chloe lands in front of them. Kong cannot help commenting internally that her movements looked less like scouting and more like someone traveling through trees for fun. Chloe explains that she was trying not to leave traces. Leon immediately asks for a report. Chloe informs the group that there is a cave roughly 500 meters ahead. The team advances. Soon they stand at the entrance. The inside is pitch black. Then dozens of glowing eyes become visible in the darkness. Dark mermen. The cave is packed with them. Rachel quickly estimates at least 50 or 60 creatures. The atmosphere changes. Everyone understands the opportunity. If they eliminate the entire group, first place becomes highly likely. At the same time, the danger and risk of injuries increase dramatically. In the end, the decision belongs to Leon. Earlier, before entering the island, the team had already divided roles. Chloe would handle scouting. Speed Weapon originally volunteered for the position, but Leon assigned him elsewhere. Kongjiyama received rear support duty and was told to handle anything approaching from behind. Rather than feeling insulted, Kongjiyama quietly appreciated getting the least exhausting assignment. Leon places himself in the center. His plan is to advance only when necessary. Rachel notices this and becomes curious. Instead of answering immediately, Leon reveals his strategy only to her. Back on the island, Kongjiyama notices from Leon's expression that a decision has already been made. Leon immediately signals Rachel. She had apparently been assigned the opening move. Rachel raises her halberd and begins charging it with energy. Then, without hesitation, she launches it directly into the center of the merman's camp. The rest of the group watches in confusion. For a brief moment, it seems easier to just attack the monsters directly. But before the merman can react, Rachel moves. She closes the distance instantly, retrieves the halberd, and cuts through two creatures in a single motion. Earlier, Leon's instructions had been simple. Create chaos and eliminate as many targets as possible. Rachel had accepted the role without hesitation. At the same time, Speed Weapon takes out a flute. As he plays, a blessing activates. The effect immediately spreads through the cave. The mermen become disoriented and begin scattering. Rachel uses the opening perfectly. Enhanced by the support effect, she starts clearing targets one after another. The count rises rapidly. Nearby, Chloe joins the assault. Acting as secondary damage support, she activates her cat blessing. Her movements become sharp and efficient. Single attacks cut through multiple mermen at once. One strike removes several. Even creatures attacking from above are dealt with immediately. Meanwhile, Rachel continues building momentum and tears through the enemy group at alarming speed. Eventually, both she and Chloe notice something strange. Their paths are crossing, or more accurately, they are both charging toward the same position. For a second, it almost looks like they are about to collide. Then a giant merman suddenly drops behind them. Its jaws open. Neither of them even turns around. They continue moving. A moment later, the creature splits apart. Rachel casually acknowledges that Chloe seems faster. Chloe appears equally unwilling to concede. Then both separate and continue clearing different sections. Watching from behind, Kongjiyama quietly relaxes. At least they're attacking the monsters instead of each other. Nearby, Leon finishes another merman with a clean strike. Noticing Kongjiyama's expression, Leon points out that he seemed worried. Kongjiyama realizes he was. But clearly there was no need. The cave is already nearly cleared. Leon reminds him that trusting allies matters, then signals the team to advance. Kongjiyama cannot help being impressed. The strategy worked perfectly. Technically, the plan was just letting two absurdly strong people handle everything. But effective leadership is still effective leadership. As Kongjiyama reflects on that, a blue flash appears behind him. Before anyone reacts, it passes straight through Leon's chest. Everything stops. The group freezes. Kongjiyama slowly turns. Standing there is a demonic siren. Rachel immediately realizes something is wrong. Speed Weapon cannot understand how this happened. The cave was supposed to be cleared. Kongjiyama stands still. This was supposed to be a control mission. Now everything has collapsed. Fight? Retreat? With Leon injured, escaping no longer seems realistic. Rachel immediately turns to Speed Weapon and tells him to contact the instructors. A moment later, bad news arrives. Communication has been cut. The atmosphere instantly changes. Without outside support, panic becomes a real possibility. Kongjiyama closes his eyes for a moment, then steps forward. Someone needs to act. He immediately assigns roles. Speed Weapon is ordered to focus entirely on healing Leon. Chloe is told to leave and warned both cadets and instructors. At first, she hesitates, but Kangjiyama points out the obvious. Moving Leon in his current condition would only slow everyone down. Warning the others matters more. After a brief pause, Chloe leaves. Rachel, now visibly angry, turns toward Kangjiyama. She wants to know what he plans to do. Kangjiyama calmly assigns the remaining enemies to her and Speed Weapon. Then he quietly gathers himself. Back when he worked with fish, the difficult ones were always more interesting. Simple work never required real skill. Looking ahead at the siren, he decides to handle this one himself. As Kangjiyama prepares to fight, he recalls something important. Demons possess a power different from blessings. Magic. Humans rely on blessings and inherited abilities, but demons manipulate magic directly. Even Leon, the protagonist, had been injured by a simple magical attack. That alone says enough about the difference between humans and demons. Kangjiyama honestly cannot guarantee victory, even with the sword god's blessing. In the original game, enemies capable of using magic were never meant to be defeated alone. Normally, defeating one required a full party, and yet he somehow ended up facing one by himself. The situation is absurd enough to make him wonder where things went wrong. Still, after thinking about it, he decides there is no point doubting now. If the enemy fights seriously, it will be difficult. But difficulty is not defeat. Kangjiyama draws his weapon. His goal is simple. Finish this within 40 seconds. Behind him, Rachel continues fighting. At first, she handles the merman easily, but the endless numbers gradually begin slowing her down. Nearby, Speed Weapon notices her situation. He wants to support her with blessings. Unfortunately, maintaining Leon's treatment already consumes most of his concentration. Rachel will have to manage alone. Meanwhile, Speed Weapon cannot help doubting Kangjiyama. No matter how strong he is, fighting a demon alone sounds impossible. The siren raises her arm and attacks. Kangjiyama immediately avoids the strike and closes the distance. From the exchange, he quickly reaches a conclusion. This enemy specializes in long-range combat and water-based magic. He knows nothing about magic, but flesh is still flesh. He launches forward and aims for a decisive strike. The blade cuts straight through her body. For a brief moment, it works. Then the body reforms. The siren instantly appears near Speed Weapon and targets him instead. Frozen in place, Speed Weapon can only watch. Before the attack lands, Kangjiyama arrives. One clean strike removes part of her fin and interrupts the attack. He immediately attacks again, but something feels wrong. The cuts are not deep enough. Realizing she is losing the exchange, the siren retreats into the water. Kangjiyama watches her disappear. Then something clicks. She was not targeting whoever was strongest. She was prioritizing injured opponents. He glances back. Speed Weapon is still standing. Kangjiyama checks briefly to make sure he is all right. Satisfied, he leaves the healing to him and returns to the fight. The comment leaves Speed Weapon unexpectedly shaken. It reminds him of an old belief. To him, heroes were supposed to represent courage, sacrifice, and turning hopeless situations around. That was the reason he entered the academy. He wanted to meet someone worthy of that image. Originally, he thought Leon would become that person. Looking at Kangjiyama now, he struggles to understand him. Kangjiyama is strong, but his presence feels dangerous. More like a weapon than a hero. Back in the battle, the siren attacks again. This time she launches several merman-like projectiles. Kangjiyama dodges them easily. Then he notices something. They are tracking him. Even after avoiding them, they continue adjusting direction. The siren suddenly attacks again. Kangjiyama cuts through the obstacle in front of him and moves. Then he realizes too late. The projectiles were never meant for him. They change direction, straight towards Speed Weapon. Rachel immediately notices and reacts, but she is too far. Just before impact, Kangjiyama appears. One swing, the projectiles split apart. As he lands, frustration builds. He realizes he has been holding back and relying on repeated shallow cuts. That approach will not work. Then he notices something. Earlier, when he severed the siren's arm, she had been casting magic. Now the detached limb hits the ground. The unfinished spell fires in an uncontrolled direction. A massive purple blast erupts through the cave and tears upward like lightning. The siren immediately attempts another attack. But Kangjiyama moves first. He redirects the incoming merman projectiles. This time, they slam back into their owner. The explosion sends the siren flying and buries her beneath the collapsing cave. Far away from the battlefield, a blue-haired girl notices the disturbance. The sound reaches her position. Moments later, a flash of light appears in the distance. Someone nearby comments that it looked like an instructor moving toward the source. Whatever happened, it was impossible to ignore. As the pink-haired instructor turns toward the source of the disturbance, rain begins falling. She quickly tells a student beside her that they need to move and check on the injured. When the student mentions the flash and strange sound from earlier, the instructor casually explains it away as weather. According to her, it was probably only lightning and thunder caused by the rain. Then she calmly suggests returning to the academy as soon as possible. The explanation feels strangely smooth. The slight smile she gives leaves room for suspicion, but nothing confirms whether she knows more than she is letting on. Back at the cave, after the siren is struck by her own redirected attacks and buried beneath the collapse, the remaining mermen immediately scatter. Kangjiyama watches carefully. Something feels wrong. He realizes his previous attacks were not decisive enough. Part of him had been distracted by Leon's condition. The cave collapsed on top of the siren, but he cannot believe she died that easily. A moment later, purple lightning erupts from beneath the debris. The siren breaks free. Without hesitation, she rushes toward him. Kangjiyama removes his coat and tosses it aside. Since the mermen are mostly under control now, he leaves Leon and Speed Weapon to Rachel. Speed Weapon watches silently. At first he thought Kangjiyama was simply reckless. Now it feels like he is witnessing something entirely different. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama rolls up his sleeves. Only a small amount of time remains. 10 seconds. Too much time has already been wasted. As the siren attacks again, he closes his eyes briefly. When he opens them, his focus sharpens completely. At this point, appearances no longer matter. Demon or not, his objective remains the same. Cut through it. Elsewhere, Chloe runs through the forest. Her breathing is unstable. Her legs feel heavy. Every step hurts. Even so, she keeps moving. If she can find even the smallest amount of help, she needs to bring it back. She trusts Kangjiyama's strength more than anyone. At the same time, she knows he never enjoys fighting. He always avoided drawing his blade unless there was no other option. That alone makes the current situation feel dangerous. Then, a huge explosion echoes from the cave. Chloe immediately bites her lip. Her pace increases. She desperately hopes he is still alive. Tears start forming as she continues running. She calls for help repeatedly. Suddenly, she senses movement ahead. Her thoughts are too scattered to process properly. She cannot tell whether she found humans or monsters. Acting on instinct, she attacks first. Her strike is stopped instantly. Another blade blocks her. She looks up. Abel is standing there. Chloe freezes. Only then does she realize the people in front of her are students. Abel looks equally confused. Chloe finally relaxes. The relief hits all at once. She collapses from exhaustion before she can explain. Some nearby students react immediately and question what she was doing. Abel stops them. Looking closer, she realizes she recognizes Chloe. Barely conscious, Chloe manages to force out only one request. Help Kangjiyama. Back at the cave, Speed Weapon watches silently. The scene unfolding in front of him no longer resembles a normal fight. Kangjiyama is not overpowering the siren through speed alone. Every movement feels controlled. Every strike creates another opening. He is not chasing attacks, he is guiding the battle. The entire style comes from something unexpectedly simple: cutting. His movements resemble someone preparing ingredients rather than fighting. Yet each motion naturally becomes offense, defense, and pressure at the same time. To Speed Weapon, the battle no longer looks like combat. It looks like someone handling something dangerous with absolute familiarity. And somehow, the result is completely one-sided. Even Rachel is forced to stop and watch. As the successor of the Spear clan, she grew up surrounded by exceptional fighters. Yet what she is seeing now feels unfamiliar. Kangjiyama is not overpowering the enemy through brute force or overwhelming speed. His movements feel unusually efficient. For a moment, it seems like the siren might actually lose. Then Rachel suddenly notices something. Immediately, she throws herself towards Speed Weapon and pushes him aside. An instant later, a massive beam tears through the space they occupied. The explosion leaves behind a crater. Only then does Speed Weapon realize how distracted he had become. Watching Kong fight made him forget where they were. This was not training. Their opponent was still a demonoid capable of using magic. A blade against magic was never supposed to be a favorable matchup. Even if Kong currently had control, what happened if the demon used something impossible to cut? Meanwhile, Kong remains focused. The siren slowly raises her hand. Magic gathers at her fingertips. Dozens of beams erupt at once. The attacks spread across the battlefield and close in from multiple angles. Kong does not retreat. He moves forward. His body slips through the barrage. Some attacks miss. Others are intercepted directly. Each swing creates sparks and small bursts around him. Still, he keeps advancing. Then he jumps. One clean strike cuts through the siren again. For a brief second, victory feels close. But the siren reacts immediately. Bodies begin gathering. Dead mermen pile together and form a wall around her. Without hesitation, Kong cuts straight through. The barrier collapses instantly. Then the siren smiles. The pile of dead mermen suddenly shifts. She absorbs them. Their bodies disappear into her. The air changes. Power rapidly gathers around her. An enormous beam begins charging. Everyone immediately realizes the danger. The attack is different. Too large. Too fast. People instinctively react and try warning Kong but he does not move. Before anything reaches him, everything changes. The battlefield disappears. Suddenly, he is somewhere else. A quiet place. Water stretches beneath his feet. Everything around him is still. Kong looks around in confusion. Nothing feels real. Carefully, he reaches toward the surface and touches it. Cold. As he tries to understand where he is, his knife slips. Instinct takes over. He catches it immediately. Without thinking, he cuts. One clean motion. The world breaks. In the next instant, he is back. The battlefield returns. The charged magic collapses. The beam disappears. Kong slowly realizes what happened. Somehow, using nothing but the sashimi knife, he interrupted the spell itself. Ahead of him, the siren's body separates cleanly. The attack had already passed through. Her form collapses onto the ground. For a moment, she still moves, as though trying to continue. No one else reacts. Kong simply steps forward, then ends it. One final strike. The battlefield becomes silent. The severed remains roll into the crater and stop. Speed Weapon stands frozen. Rachel says nothing. Neither of them expected this outcome. A first-year student defeated a demonoid alone. Not through overwhelming force. Not through a legendary weapon. But through technique. For a moment, nobody knows what to say. And yet, the feeling that something strange still remains has not disappeared. Then suddenly, something spills across Kong clothes. Blood. His body finally gives out. The accumulated strain from forcing his blessings beyond their limits catches up all at once. His knees buckle. He grabs his side and collapses. Rachel reacts first. She rushes over immediately and supports him before he hits the ground. Holding him upright, she tries to keep him conscious. The panic in her expression makes it clear she had not expected him to push himself this far. Nearby, Leon slowly regains consciousness. Still dazed, he sits up. Speed Weapon notices and finally relaxes. At least Leon is alive. Then, footsteps. Everyone freezes. Speed Weapon immediately tenses. For a second, he thinks the surviving merman returned. But instead, people emerge from the forest. Abel and her group arrive. The atmosphere shifts instantly. They stop as soon as they see the battlefield. Collapsed terrain. Destroyed cave. Scattered remains. And at the center, the body of a dead siren. Several of Abel's teammates struggle to understand what they are seeing. Rachel remains beside Kong and refuses to leave him. Abel notices. Her eyes narrow slightly. For some reason, seeing Rachel stay so close bothers her more than she expects. Then she notices Leon. Compared to everyone else, he looks relatively unharmed. That only makes the scene stranger. After collecting herself, Abel informs everyone that contact with the academy was successful. Rescue had come, but not immediately. At best, it would still take time. So first, someone needed to explain what happened. Speed Weapon is visibly irritated. From his perspective, this situation should never have happened. The island had supposedly been clear beforehand. If a demonoid still appeared, someone had failed. Abel understands the frustration, but pushes for an explanation. After some resistance, Speed Weapon finally starts talking. He explains everything. The separation, the cave, the merman, the siren, the failed communication, and finally, Kangjiyama fighting alone. By the time he finishes, the group falls silent. Abel stares at him. She repeats the situation internally. A first-year student, alone, defeating a demonoid. It sounds ridiculous, like one of those exaggerated stories passed down through generations. The kind her grandfather used to tell. Stories where impossible people appeared and changed battlefields. She looks at Kangjiyama again. Collapsed. Exhausted. Nothing about him looks legendary. And yet, the destroyed battlefield says otherwise. For the first time, Abel cannot decide which is harder to believe. That someone like him won, or that she is starting to believe it. Abel continues staring at the battlefield. The destroyed cave. The crater. Scattered merman remains. And Kangjiyama lying unconscious at the center of it all. The explanation sounds absurd. But looking at the evidence, she cannot deny it. No one would invent something like this. The scene in front of her feels less like an exam and more like witnessing the beginning of a legend. Her thoughts drift inward. As a descendant of the hero Valor Wachin and the legendary disciple Aaron Nibelung, she was born carrying expectations few people could understand. Her bloodline alone placed her among the elite. But she had never wanted to rely only on inherited talent. Everything she achieved came through constant training and relentless effort. She earned her position. Yet now, looking at Kangjiyama, the difference feels impossible to ignore. The emotions are unfamiliar. Admiration, pressure, and a faint fear. For a moment, she wonders if perhaps she had mistaken effort for exceptional talent all along. But she pushes the thought aside. Right now, there are more important things. She immediately tells her team to prioritize treatment. One of them kneels beside Kangjiyama and begins healing him. Abel quietly watches. Even after reaching his limit, he still won. Someone her age defeated a demonoid alone. That fact refuses to settle. Then Speed Weapon interrupts her thoughts. He reminds everyone that she contacted the Academy earlier. She confirms it, but Speed Weapon raises a concern. For now, they should avoid revealing every detail. Abel immediately questions why. Speed Weapon points out the obvious. The Academy claimed the island had already been investigated. Yet somehow, a hidden cave contained a demonoid. That should not have happened. Abel considers it. Scopuli Island is large. But missing something like this feels difficult to justify. Leon finally joins the discussion. Carefully, he suggests another possibility. If this really cannot be explained, could someone connected to the demons exist inside the Academy? The atmosphere changes instantly. Speed Weapon does not fully agree, but he also cannot dismiss the possibility. Abel looks back at the cave. If Kangjiyama had not been there, Leon's team would have died. That realization unsettles her. For 700 years, there had been conflicts and tension, but attacking Academy cadets directly crossed a line. That kind of action could destroy the peace entirely. Her thoughts reach an uncomfortable conclusion. This does not feel random. Someone may have allowed this to happen. Before she can continue, Speed Weapon stops her. Suspicion is reasonable. Jumping to conclusions is not. Leon shifts the discussion. If there truly is someone inside the Academy, then one thing becomes obvious. Kangjiyama cannot become public. The moment people learn that a first-year defeated a demonoid alone, he becomes a target. Speed Weapon understands. But hiding everything also feels unfair considering what Kangjiyama did. Abel thinks for a moment, then suggests something else. If they truly do not know who to trust, they should speak to her grandfather first. Sometime later, the scene shifts. Kangjiyama slowly opens his eyes. He finds himself lying in a quiet room. Not a hospital, closer to a church infirmary. For a moment, he simply raises his hand. Still alive. Then the memories return. Right before dying, the siren released something. Not an ordinary attack. A sphere of magic. He remembers seeing it clearly. Impossible to avoid. Yet his sashimi knife cut through it. Not blocked. Not dispersed. Cut. The spell split cleanly in two before collapsing. He closes his eyes and recalls the sensation. It had not felt like cutting flesh, nor energy. It felt strangely familiar, like slicing through flowing water. And that realization leaves him with another question: exactly what did his blade cut? After waking up, Kangjiyama keeps thinking about the moment his blade cut through the siren's magic. Once the sword god's blessing activated, he experienced something impossible to explain properly. It was less like seeing and more like understanding. Curious, he opens his status window. One change catches his attention. His mental fortitude increased. Thinking back, he realizes something strange. During the fight with the siren, he never truly felt fear. Even facing something far stronger than himself, his thoughts remained unusually calm. Maybe the increase is connected to that. Then he notices something else. His assimilation rate has risen again. Immediately, another possibility comes to mind. Perhaps it increased when he cut through the magic itself. Before he can think further, the door suddenly opens. Media rushes in and immediately wraps him in a tight hug. The relief on her face makes it obvious she had been worried. She even vents frustration toward the instructors responsible for scouting the island. Kangjiyama quickly realizes the situation is becoming physically difficult for different reasons. Media notices and immediately lets go. Embarrassed, she brushes it off as excitement from seeing him awake. Then she suddenly remembers something. After digging through what appears to be an impossibly large purse, she pulls something out. Kangjiyama quietly wonders if she is storing items in another dimension. Finally, she finds it. Murasame, the reward for the midterm. The system identifies it immediately. A B-rank Japanese sword. Its name means rain shower. A blade famous for an edge compared to dew. Media apologizes slightly. Originally, the reward should have been given properly during the ceremony, but circumstances made that impossible. As they speak, she notices someone standing outside. Without hesitation, she calls him in. A moment later, Siegfried enters. He immediately complains about being dragged in so casually. Media dismisses him completely. Watching them interact gives Kangjiyama a strange feeling of familiarity. He asks why both of them came personally. Media's expression changes. She explains she already heard everything from the team. Then, both she and Siegfried lower their heads. Kangjiyama freezes. Media apologizes formally on behalf of the academy. This incident should never have happened. Not only Kangjiyama and his teammates, everyone involved nearly died. As director, she promises to uncover the truth. Siegfried quietly adds that regardless of circumstances, Kangjiyama protected the cadets. Kangjiyama awkwardly responds that he only did what he could. Media continues. As impressive as his actions were, they intend to keep details of the incident hidden for now, until the truth is confirmed. Then she reveals something unexpected. Someone responsible may exist inside the academy itself. She apologizes again. Kangjiyama simply accepts it. Media watches him quietly. For someone his age, he handles everything too calmly. Sometimes she thinks he acts more like an old man than a teenager. Later, after leaving the room, Media and Siegfried walk down the hallway. Suddenly, Media stops beside a window. She asks if he remembers their first meeting. Siegfried looks confused. Media recalls how, back when they enrolled, he had been sitting alone on a bench. She had annoyed him immediately. Instead of responding, he simply drew his sword. At the time, she thought he looked ridiculous. Siegfried claims he does not remember. Media smiles. To her, it still feels recent. Yet 60 years have already passed. She laughs quietly at the thought. Even after all that time, their lives barely cover a fraction of the Academy's history. When they entered, Watching Academy was already ancient. It had survived generations, protected students, raised heroes, endured incidents both large and small. For 700 years, the Academy remained standing. Then, the glass beside them suddenly cracks. Media's aura leaks out for a moment. Her calm expression disappears. For the first time, her anger becomes visible. Siegfried quietly watches, because he understands. This time, someone crossed a line. Media remained by the broken window. She explained that before the midterms began, the Academy had already received several reports confirming repeated inspections of Scopuli Island. Mermaid sightings there were uncommon but not unheard of, which was exactly why additional precautions had been taken beforehand. That only made the outcome harder to accept. Siegfried quietly stopped her. Media realized she had drifted too far into her thoughts and brushed it off with a smile. Then, as if changing the mood, she started talking about Kong Jiama's achievement and casually praised the fact that he had brought down the mermaid alone. She turned to Siegfried, clearly curious about what he thought. For a moment, he said nothing. Over the years, he had seen countless children praised as once-in-a-generation talents. Most burned brightly for a short time before disappearing. Hero families especially threw around titles carelessly whenever someone showed unusual promise. Because of that, Siegfried disliked attaching labels to young people. He had even avoided doing so for Abel. But Kong Jiama felt different, not because of status or overwhelming strength. There was simply something impossible to define about him. His growth no longer felt measurable, and for the first time in a long while, Siegfried found himself wondering how far someone like that could actually go. Without continuing the conversation, he started walking away. Media watched him and jokingly reminded him about helping with the remaining work. He ignored it and left. The scene shifted back to the wolf class. Kong Jiama quietly reflected on recent events. The details of Scopuli Island, especially the final moments of the battle, appear to have been intentionally hidden under the director's orders. Looking around, life at the academy felt strangely unchanged. Maybe that normal atmosphere only existed because the incident never spread. After leaving recovery, the first thing he did was visit the academy forge. To most people, Murasame was already a finished weapon. To him, it was only a starting point. Because of the sword God's blessing, simply carrying the sword as it was made little sense. Adjustments were necessary. Fortunately, the blacksmith accepted the request. Thanks to the Academy's 700th anniversary, the work would be free. The only requirement was waiting a week. Now, all Kong Jiama could do was hope the enhancement succeeded. His thoughts were interrupted when Chloe appeared. She looked much more energetic than before. When he asked about her recovery, she casually showed her injured foot and explained that emergency treatment had prevented anything serious and she would likely recover soon. She nearly slipped into talking proudly about her background before awkwardly stopping herself. Seeing her act normally again, Kong Jiama quietly felt relieved. Even if he dealt the final blow, that battle had never been his victory alone. Chloe brought help. Rachel controlled the battlefield. Speed weapons supported everyone. Each person carried part of the result. Kong Jiama then asked whether anything unusual happened while he was gone. Chloe mentioned hearing rumors about disagreements growing between the director and the academy elders. Thinking back again, Kong Jiama mentally counted everyone's contribution. Then one thought suddenly crossed his mind. Leon. After replaying the battle in his head, he realized Leon's role had mostly been directing the team. That made Kong Jiama pause. If the future hero planned to solve everything through leadership alone, that road sounded far more dangerous than heroic. The classroom door suddenly swings open. The instructor immediately restores order and tells everyone to stop chatting and remain seated. Once the room settles down, he announces that before training begins, there is something important to address. Apparently, starting for the time being, the class will not be handled by him alone. There will be an additional instructor. The students react with visible disappointment. Most assume this means stricter schedules and more work. Then the new instructor enters. The room instantly goes silent. Siegfried, the sword emperor himself. Nobody expected someone of that status to appear in an ordinary classroom. Whispers spread immediately. Meanwhile, Kong Jiama stares blankly, unable to understand why someone like Siegfried suddenly appeared here. The scene shifts elsewhere. A man is thrown onto the floor. Blood stains the ground. Someone grabs him and forces him upright. Then, a sharp slap lands across his face. Standing there is Instructor Kim. The old man trembles. She calmly explains that higher authorities are not pleased. Her tone remains casual despite the atmosphere. She plays with a strange, worm-like object while criticizing him. According to her, the task had not been complicated. Leon only needed to be pushed to the edge. Yet, even with preparation and outside assistance, everything failed. Now, someone unexpected remains safely inside the academy. The old man attempts to defend himself. He receives another strike. Instructor Kim continues speaking lightly, almost bored. She complains about the inconvenience and mocks the result. Even bringing a mermaid into the operation accomplished nothing. Looking at this year's students, though, she admits they seem unusually troublesome. Then she hears something unexpected. The mermaid was not defeated by Leon. She pauses. Naturally, she assumes the hero candidate must have done it. But after hearing the answer, her expression changes. Not Leon. Kangjiyama, the special admission student. For a second, she seems confused, then unexpectedly interested. Whatever expectations she had, they shift completely. The scene moves back to the academy training grounds. Students run together during training. Off to the side, Chloe sits resting and occasionally waves encouragement toward the runners. Kangjiyama notices and quietly envies her position. Then someone suddenly appears beside him. Siegfried, not supervising, running. The Sword Emperor keeps pace with the students as though it is completely normal. He briefly checks Kangjiyama's condition after the midterms. Kangjiyama assures him he recovered, but internally, he cannot understand what is happening. Out of everyone here, why is the Sword Emperor running beside him? Kangjiyama keeps glancing sideways while running. The person beside him is not just some visiting instructor. Siegfried von Nibelung, a descendant of the first Sword Saint, successor to Aaron Nibelung, the legendary right hand of Valor Wachin, the man destined to inherit the title of Sword Saint. Someone whose importance explodes in the later half of the story. During the Second Demon War, he was even supposed to become Leon's swordsmanship mentor, which only makes this situation stranger. Why was someone this important standing here instead? Shouldn't he be guiding Leon? Kangjiyama quietly feels the story drifting further away from what he remembers. Then another thought appears. Leon never actually inherited the Sword Saint title in the original story. That had become a major topic among players. Still, that should not affect this. Around him, students keep glancing in his direction. Running beside the Sword Emperor apparently creates an image everyone wants to remember. Kangjiyama only feels uncomfortable. Then Siegfried begins speaking to the group. His lesson is simple. Talent alone means little if the body cannot support it. Strength, endurance, and conditioning form the base for everything else. Without that foundation, growth eventually stops. The message is clear. Stop looking for shortcuts. Kangjiyama responds immediately. Siegfried pushes for more energy. Kangjiyama ends up shouting properly this time. Satisfied, Siegfried increases the pace and tells everyone to keep moving. Meanwhile, Kangjiyama starts wondering whether old age works backward for this man. Later during training, Siegfried gathers everyone again, then unexpectedly bans the use of personal weapons except during official field exercises. Students react immediately. Confusion spreads through the group. Siegfried drops a large bag on the ground. Inside are ordinary weapons of all kinds. His new rule is simple. Pick one. Learn it. Complaints appear instantly. Some students argue that their family weapons were passed down for generations. Others insist they should train with what they will actually use. Siegfried listens, then explains his reasoning. The stronger the weapon, the easier it becomes to confuse borrowed strength with personal ability. People who rely too much on equipment often neglect fundamentals. Another student argues that understanding high-grade weapons should still matter. Siegfried agrees, only partially. To him, no weapon can compensate for lack of skill. Mastery comes first. Once someone truly understands the basics, adapting becomes natural. He also casually mentions something else. Students who perform well using standard equipment tend to score better during end-of-year evaluations. That changes everything. The students immediately rush toward the pile. Moments ago, they were complaining. Now, they fight over ordinary weapons. Watching the chaos, Kangjiyama quietly admits that Siegfried knows exactly how to motivate people. Then he looks down. After the scramble, only leftovers remain. Mixed into the pile, a familiar shape. A sashimi knife. Without hesitation, Kangjiyama picks it up. At that exact moment, he notices Siegfried looking at him. Kangjiyama immediately becomes suspicious. This feels intentional. Siegfried says nothing. Instead, he announces the next stage. Everyone's objective for today is simple. Get used to the weapon in their hands. After that, one-on-one matches will begin. The mood changes instantly. Students who had been excited about choosing weapons suddenly realize what comes next. Actual sparring. No subspace. Real weapons. Real consequences. One student nervously asks whether injuries are possible. Siegfried explains that warriors do not grow by remaining safe. Anyone carrying the legacy of heroes must eventually face real combat and accept the possibility of failure. But recklessness and growth are different things. Without control, even training can become deadly. So before pairing everyone up, he decides to demonstrate proper sparring himself. Excitement immediately spreads. Many students had only ever seen the Sword Emperor fight through recordings. Watching him in person feels unreal. Meanwhile, instructor Lee Wonbin quietly enters survival mode. Outwardly calm, internally preparing his last words. Facing the Sword Emperor, even in practice, feels less like instruction and more like volunteering for disaster. He starts moving forward but stops. A hand cuts him off. Siegfried has already chosen. His eyes settle on Kong Jiama. The entire room freezes. Students immediately begin whispering, not because of Kong, but because the Sword Emperor personally called him. That alone changes everything. Kong already regrets being alive. Siegfried asks about his recovery after the midterms. After confirming Kong is fine, he tells him to prepare. Kong immediately realizes this is a problem. This isn't sparring between students. This is crossing blades with one of humanity's strongest people. A normal exchange here could become an accident. And accidents at this level don't end with bruises. Part of him wants to refuse. Another part, something sharper, reacts differently. His instincts feel strangely awake, almost excited, which annoys him. Trying to avoid the situation, Kong lowers himself and insists he isn't qualified. Some students laugh. Others think he's backing down. But Siegfried doesn't accept that answer. Instead, he attacks something else. Pride. He questions how long talent can survive if hidden forever. Power without conviction. Skill without courage. To everyone else, it sounds like pressure. To Kong, it lands somewhere deeper. For a moment, old memories surface. His previous life. His years in the kitchen. His obsession with perfect technique. The pride that carried him to the top. Back then, mastery meant never turning away from the blade. Kong realizes something. This isn't about winning. Siegfried is testing whether he has abandoned that mindset. Teacher Lee tries to stop things, but Siegfried raises a hand. No interruption, because Kong has already decided. The room falls silent. Kong reaches down and lifts the sashimi knife. No dramatic declaration. No heroic speech. Just acceptance. He takes his stance, and for a brief second, the atmosphere changes. Students feel it immediately. Something invisible settles over the field. As Kong steps forward, Siegfried watches quietly. His thoughts drift backward. Decades ago, before titles and legends, he once met a wandering swordsman with only one arm. That man showed him a glimpse of a place beyond ordinary swordsmanship, a realm he never reached. Since then, he's searched. Countless prodigies, countless disappointments, bright talents that disappeared. But this boy, this strange student with an ordinary body and impossible technique, feels different. Siegfried grips his sword. For the first time in years, he wonders whether the answer he had been searching for all his life might finally be standing in front of him. They clash. The moment Siegfried swings, Kong avoids it instead of meeting it head-on. Siegfried notices immediately. The reactions, the timing, the movement. His expression shifts. Kong suddenly closes distance, jumps in, and attacks. Siegfried blocks, but what catches him off guard isn't the attack. It's the sword path. Unusual, light, sharp, like a swallow changing direction mid-flight. Kong rotates the sashimi knife, redirects incoming force, and transitions into a counter. Siegfried blocks again, and this time feels himself pushed back. His thoughts sharpen. Compared to before, Kang's body has clearly changed. Yet despite that growth, his own sword should never be light enough to move this easily. Realizing this, Siegfried finally uses more strength. His sword moves again. Outside the exchange, students continue misunderstanding what they're seeing. Some still assume Kong only looked impressive because of favorable matchups. Others believe he simply stood out among special admissions. But none of them understand why someone like the Sword Emperor is treating him seriously. Some even hope Kong gets crushed. Then confusion spreads. From a perspective, nothing is happening. Both figures appear frozen. Instructor Lee notices immediately. They're not standing still. Something else is happening. His thoughts return to an earlier conversation. Before the demonstration, he questioned Siegfried. What if things became dangerous? What if the students got caught up in it? Siegfried had dismissed the concern. According to him, if his theory was correct, Kong could step into a different place. The mental realm. Back in the present, the instructor finally understands. This isn't ordinary sparring. Inside that invisible space, every exchange is a collision of perception, instinct, and intent. Crossing swords there reveals far more than technique. Siegfried becomes increasingly certain. Kong is adapting, growing. Even now, satisfied, he releases another level of power. Blue light gathers. A spirit forms around his movements. Sword spirit protection. The pressure instantly rises. They rush toward each other. Outside, blue light bursts around them. Students panic. Instructor Lee realizes something is wrong. This has gone beyond demonstration. If this continues, someone will get hurt. He runs forward, trying to stop them. But before anyone reaches them, another figure appears. Media. She cuts directly between them. Her anger arrives before her voice. The atmosphere collapses instantly. The clash ends. The students freeze. What follows is less a lecture and more an execution. Siegfried ends up receiving the full force of Media's frustration. To her, there is no excuse. She worked to bring him here, and he nearly turned a class demonstration into a disaster. Siegfried attempts to explain, but she isn't interested. The students quietly witness something unbelievable. The legendary Sword Emperor getting scolded like a child. Eventually, everything settles. Later, Siegfried apologizes. Media asks him why he thought any of this was acceptable. After a pause, she remembers the moment she interrupted. How close things had gotten. How easily that line could have been crossed. Siegfried quietly insists that wasn't his intention. But Media doesn't look convinced. Because regardless of intention, for a brief moment, he stopped treating Kong Jiama as a student and started treating him as someone standing on equal ground. As Kong Jiama puts away his sashimi knife, Siegfried quietly reflects. For a moment, he had gone too far. Without realizing it, he had released his aura seriously. That wasn't supposed to happen. Media immediately confronts him. She demands an explanation for why he pushed a student to that level and reminds him what could have happened if she had arrived even a little later. Siegfried pauses, then apologizes. The answer catches her off guard. In more than 50 years, she had almost never heard those words from him. And now, he had said them more than once. That alone tells her how unusual this was. Still unsatisfied, she presses him further. Why use sword spirit protection against a student? Siegfried answers honestly. Without using it, he couldn't secure control of the exchange. Media freezes. For a second, she thinks she misheard. This is Siegfried, someone whose pride in his sword bordered on absolute certainty. And yet, he just admitted he needed more. She knows Kong Jiama is talented, but she also knows better than anyone how terrifying Siegfried truly is. Then he says something even stranger. Kong already stepped into the mental realm. Media stares at him. That shouldn't be possible. Siegfried himself only reached that stage much later in life after years of refinement. Yet somehow, a 17-year-old reached it naturally. Even Siegfried admits he doesn't understand it. But if there exists something capable of overcoming decades of difference, then perhaps age and experience aren't absolute. Media suddenly remembers earlier. When she rushed in to stop them, Kong looked at her. For only an instant. But what she felt wasn't pressure. It was fear. The same instinctive discomfort she once experienced facing the 6th Division commander. She doesn't understand why that feeling came from a student. But she can't dismiss it anymore. She turns back and asks directly, did he lose? Siegfried immediately rejects the idea. According to him, talent alone isn't enough. Experience still matters. Besides, he wasn't fighting seriously. Media immediately catches the contradiction. The same person who always preached that masters never rely on equipment or excuses is suddenly explaining circumstances. She doesn't let him live that down. What follows becomes less discussion and more public humiliation. The legendary Sword Emperor spends the next few minutes getting verbally dismantled. Back elsewhere, Kong reflects on what happened. Things ended safely, but only barely. If Media hadn't interrupted, the result might have become dangerous. Then his thoughts returned to the place he experienced. the mental realm. Actually entering it felt different than he imagined. It wasn't simply technique. It was complete immersion, a state created through mastery and understanding of one's weapon. Only people who dedicate their lives to a single path usually reach it. Even in Miracle Blessing M, very few could enter freely. Leon himself required years before reaching that stage. So why did Kong arrive there immediately? Then something clicks. The Sashimi knife. Including his previous life, he has spent more than 20 years holding one. Every movement, every cut, every repetition, and combined with the strange concentration created by the sword god's blessing, those years didn't disappear after coming here. His old life and current life had quietly merged. Maybe all those years of slicing fish weren't left behind after all. Maybe they had been sharpening him this entire time. Kong looks down at the sashimi knife. By now, he's learned one thing. Trying to avoid problems only seems to create bigger ones. Running away never works. So instead of getting dragged around by circumstances, he decides to focus on what he can control and solve things one step at a time. With that in mind, he draws the knife. If he can enter the mental realm at will, then he can continue training without relying on the sword god's blessing. Kong closes his eyes and concentrates. Almost immediately, his surroundings begin to shift. The mental realm forms around him. But something is wrong. A crack suddenly appears in the space. Then, a hand emerges from the fracture and touches his shoulder. The moment it happens, light spreads across his arm. Kong instinctively looks down. His knife begins crumbling apart before his eyes. The realm collapses. Everything shatters. A second later, he finds himself back in reality. Confused, Kong tries to understand what just happened. He had entered successfully, yet something interrupted the process and forcibly expelled him. Meanwhile, elsewhere within the academy, an entirely different discussion is taking place. The elders are in the middle of a heated argument. Several of them openly criticize the recent operation, sending demons after students had crossed the line. Others argue that the decision had already been approved and that hesitation now serves no purpose. The debate quickly shifts toward Kanjiyama. According to some of the elders, he has become too suspicious to ignore. Officially, Leon Van Reinhardt is supposed to be the Academy's future hero candidate. Yet Kang's actions continue attracting attention. His performance during the placement exam, the defeat of the Mao brothers. The information media continues hiding under the excuse of protecting a student. Everything surrounding him feels abnormal. Another elder points out that heroes are dangerous precisely because of what they represent. The appearance of a true hero changes the balance of power. That reality has always threatened those who benefit from the current system. The discussion gradually reveals the real issue. The elders no longer hold the influence they once had. Since media became director, the authority of the Seven Stars has continued growing. Public admiration increasingly belongs to heroes rather than the Academy's governing elders. To some of them, a new hero represents opportunity. To others, it represents extinction. As the conversation continues, one conclusion begins gaining support. Potential threats must be dealt with before they become impossible to control. And eventually, the discussion turns toward the Audiator family. Orders are quietly approved. Elsewhere, a hammer crashes onto the floor. A blacksmith stands trembling. Across from him, Kong looks anything but pleased. The blacksmith quickly begins explaining himself. During decades of forging weapons, he has never encountered anything like this blade. The metal actively resisted the forging process. Every attempt to reshape it resulted in instability. In the end, he was forced to melt everything down and rebuild it from scratch just to preserve its form. Even then, the result barely held together. According to the blacksmith, an ordinary craftsman would have failed completely. The weapon would have collapsed into useless scrap long before completion. Only after exhausting every option did he manage to create something usable. And judging from the sweat pouring down his face, he isn't entirely convinced the sword will survive much longer either. Kong studies the newly forged weapon in silence. Even with more than 20 years of experience handling knives, he has to admit the craftsmanship is impressive. The design matches the requirements of his blessing almost perfectly. Unfortunately, the durability does not. The weapon's hardness has dropped all the way to E rank. Seeing Kang's expression, the blacksmith hurriedly continues his explanation. While the current result is disappointing, the The weapon possesses excellent growth potential. With proper reinforcement, it could eventually return to high rank or even surpass its previous state. As compensation, he offers to handle future reinforcement work free of charge if Kong brings the required materials. Kong remains unconvinced. If the weapon breaks again, none of that matters. The blacksmith nearly panics. He quickly explains that growth-type weapons are rare. There are special reinforcement materials capable of stabilizing the blade permanently. The problem is obtaining them. The highest quality materials come from powerful demonic beasts. Kong immediately realizes what that means. Creatures at that level are not something he wants to encounter voluntarily. Fighting another monster comparable to the mermaid sounds less like equipment maintenance and more like attempted suicide. Lower-grade materials are easier to obtain, but they still cost money. Money he definitely doesn't have. For a brief moment, he considers asking media for help. The thought alone is embarrassing, yet it remains a practical option. Returning his attention to the blacksmith, Kong demands a guarantee. The blacksmith swears on his reputation that the weapon can be improved. Kong accepts that, but raises another issue. The original B-rank sword was turned into scrap during the process. As far as he's concerned, compensation is only fair. The blacksmith is horrified. From his perspective, he fulfilled every request and already waived future fees. Kong remains unmoved. Market value is market value. The destroyed materials still had worth. The negotiation rapidly turns into a battle of endurance. The blacksmith attempts to lower the amount. Kong refuses. The numbers go back and forth several times. Eventually, after realizing Kong has absolutely no intention of backing down, the blacksmith surrenders. Though the final amount is lower than Kong originally demanded, it is still enough to make the craftsman look physically wounded. As Kong leaves, the blacksmith quietly mourns the loss of expensive materials and wonders how a student managed to negotiate like a veteran merchant. Later, Kong sits alone on a bench, enjoying a meal. The earlier argument appears completely forgotten. Opening the system interface, he reviews the information on his new weapon. The changes are immediate. His armament stat has increased. Additional options have unlocked. Most importantly, the side effects of the sword god's blessing have slightly decreased. That alone makes the weapon worthwhile. The unbearable pain hasn't disappeared. Far from it. But after testing the difference himself, Kong notices a clear improvement. Previously, activating the blessing felt like approaching death. Now, it merely feels unbearable, which, surprisingly, counts as progress. The realization motivates him. If one level of improvement can reduce the burden this much, then continued growth may eventually allow him to use the blessing without destroying himself in the process. For the first time, weapon enhancement becomes a genuine priority. The stronger the weapon becomes, the closer he gets to understanding the mysterious power connected to it, and perhaps the truth behind why he was brought into this world. Lost in thought, Kong continues reviewing the system. Then a familiar voice pulls him back to reality. Looking up, he finds Chloe approaching. She notices the untouched food in front of him and immediately questions why he stopped eating. Kong simply shrugs. After everything that happened today, he no longer feels particularly hungry. Kang's gaze drifted toward Chloe's leg. The cast was gone. Noticing where he was looking, Chloe immediately brightened and proudly showed off her injured leg. Although she still needed crutches for support, her recovery was progressing much faster than expected. She happily demonstrated that she could balance on one foot without immediately falling over. To her, it was proof that everything was getting better. Kong couldn't help thinking that her understanding of human anatomy was a little questionable. Still, seeing her healthy enough to joke around was reassuring. As they talked, Kong noticed a grain of rice stuck near the corner of her mouth. Without much thought, he reached over and brushed it away. The simple gesture completely short-circuited Chloe's brain. Her face instantly turned bright red. Attempting to retreat in embarrassment, she lost her balance and tumbled to the ground. Kong quickly offered a hand to help her back up. While recovering from her embarrassment, Chloe noticed something lying beside the bench. Curious, she picked it up. It was King's newly forged sashimi knife. The moment she held it, her eyes lit up with excitement. She carefully examined every detail of the blade, clearly impressed by its appearance. To her, it looked far better than its official rating suggested. Unfortunately, The mention of its rank only reminded Kong of reality. The weapon was still E-rank. Realizing she might have touched a sensitive subject, Chloe hurriedly tried to correct herself. Each attempt somehow sounded worse than the previous one. Watching her struggle, Kong finally reassured her. The blacksmith had already refunded part of the cost and promised future enhancements free of charge. As long as he could gather the necessary materials, the weapon would continue growing. That was enough for now. Chloe immediately regained her enthusiasm. In her eyes, Kong had already accomplished incredible things using nothing more than an ordinary sashimi knife. With a proper weapon, she was convinced he would become even stronger. Kong thanked her with a small smile. Privately, however, he wasn't particularly interested in becoming stronger. Ever since the battle against the mermaid, he had gained enough confidence to deal with most mid-level magical beasts. The real reason he wanted to improve the weapon was much simpler. He wanted to reduce the agony caused by the sword god's blessing. Not power, relief. Seeing him sigh, Chloe mistakenly assumed she had offended him and immediately apologized again. Kong awkwardly explained that his frustration had nothing to do with her. He was simply comparing the broken Murasame to his current situation. As Chloe glanced at the knife again, her expression slowly darkened. A dangerous smile appeared. In her mind, responsibility quickly shifted toward the people who had caused Kong trouble. Anyone responsible for his suffering suddenly became a target. The murderous intent gathering around her was so obvious that Kong immediately grabbed her shoulder. The interruption worked. Chloe blinked several times before realizing where her thoughts had been heading. Embarrassed, she quickly returned to normal. At that moment,